When the blood moon rises after 2 centuries of darkness, every wolf in the kingdom feels it burning in their bones. But Alpha King Kael Draven feels something worse. The awakening of the one woman destined to kill him. His mate, his prophesied executioner. In a world where immortality is a curse and destiny is a death sentence, one orphan girl will force the most feared ruler alive to choose between eternal power and mortal love. This is the story of the last Luna, and I promise you, nothing about this tale will go the way you expect. Stay with me until the end, and if this hook grabbed you by the throat, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I know where my pack is watching from. Now let's descend into the darkness. Okay. The smell hit Kael first. Iron and moonflower, impossible together, wrong in every way that mattered. He was in the throne room when it happened, mid-sentence with some sniveling alpha from the Eastern Territories, and the words died in his throat like a man drowning on dry land. His wolf surged inside him, violent and sudden. Not now. Not ever. The goblet in his hand shattered. Wine and glass mixed with blood from his palm, but Kael barely felt it. Every nerve in his body was screaming toward the south, toward something that had been sleeping for 200 years and had just opened its eyes. General Marcus stepped forward, hand on his sword. The man had been with Kael for a century and a half, knew him better than anyone living, which meant Marcus saw what the others missed, the terror carved into Kael's face beneath the rage. "Kael," the visitor, Alpha stammered. "Your Majesty, I don't understand what—" "Get out!" The words came out more wolf than man. The Eastern Alpha scrambled backward, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste to reach the door. Smart. Kael could feel his control fraying at the edges, everything he'd built over centuries threatening to crack open like rotted wood. The doors slammed shut. The sound echoed through the cavernous room, all black stone and ancient banners that had watched too many kings rise and fall. Marcus waited exactly 3 seconds before speaking. "Is it her?" Kael's hand healed as he watched, flesh knitting back together in seconds. Immortality, the gift that felt more like a noose with each passing year. He didn't answer the question, didn't need to. Instead, he walked to the window, looked out over his kingdom, the dark sprawl of Blackmoor Keep, the mountains that surrounded it like teeth, the forests that stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction. His territory. His curse. His prison built from power and prophecy. The sky above was wrong, not yet crimson, but getting there, like blood seeping through white cloth. "Send the Shadow Guard," Kael said quietly. "Find her before anyone else does." "And then?" Kael closed his eyes. The bond was already there, thin as spider silk, but growing stronger by the second. He could feel her confusion, her fear. She didn't know what she was yet. Didn't understand that her existence had just painted a target on her back that every alpha from here to the Western Sea would die trying to hit. Bring her here. Alive. Marcus hesitated. The prophecy. "I know what the damned prophecy says." The words came out sharp enough to draw blood. Marcus went still the way only old soldiers can, waiting for the storm to pass or consume them. Kael forced himself to breathe. 200 years he'd been preparing for this moment. 200 years hunting down every scrap of information about the last Luna, burning texts and killing scholars, doing everything in his power to prevent this exact situation. It hadn't been enough. "She's awake," he said. "The blood moon is rising, and every pack within 1,000 miles just felt it the same way I did." Marcus understood immediately. His scarred face went hard. "The war starts tonight." "No." Kael turned from the window, and the man looking back at Marcus was the Alpha King who'd held this kingdom together through rebellion and plague and the schemes of a dozen weaker rulers who'd tried to take his crown. The war started 200 years ago. We've just been waiting for it to finish. The mountains of Blackmoor Keep erupted into motion. Wolves scattered like leaves in a storm, some running toward the pull of the Luna's awakening, others racing to defend their territories from the chaos they knew was coming. The night filled with howls, with the ancient language of the pack speaking what words could not. Kael stood in the center of it all and felt nothing but the bond growing stronger. His mate, his executioner, the girl who would end him or save him or damn them both. Celine came back to consciousness, tasting copper and smelling smoke. Her first coherent thought was that she was dying. Her second was that dying wasn't supposed to hurt this much in this many places at once. The world swam into focus slowly, pieces assembling themselves like a puzzle. Someone kept shaking. Stone floor, burning torches, faces hovering above her, some concerned, some afraid, all of them strangers except for Mira. The older woman's face was creased with worry, her gray hair falling loose from its usual braid. She had a hand on Celine's forehead, checking for fever the way she'd done 1,000 times when Celine was a child in the orphanage. Easy, girl. Don't try to sit up yet. But Celine was already moving, instinct overriding sense. Her body felt wrong, like she'd grown 6 inches in 6 seconds, and her skin was trying to catch up. Everything was too bright, too loud, too much. What happened? You collapsed. Right in the middle of the ceremony. The ceremony. Right. The quarterly gathering where the Silver Pine Pack renewed their bonds and the orphans like Celine stood in the back and tried to make themselves invisible. She'd been doing exactly that, same as always when the pain hit. No, not pain, recognition. Like something sleeping in her bones had woken up and started screaming. Celine looked down at her arms and stopped breathing. Silver marks spiraled up from her wrists to her shoulders, delicate as lace and bright as starlight. They pulsed with her heartbeat, each flare sending another spike of sensation through her nervous system. Beautiful. Terrifying. Impossible. No, someone whispered. One of the pack members, a younger wolf Celine vaguely recognized from the kitchens. It can't be. The Luna mark hasn't appeared in 200 years. The voice came from the doorway, deep and cold as winter. I'm aware. The crowd parted instantly. Alpha Corrigan walked into the room like a storm-given flesh, massive, gray-haired, with eyes that had watched empires crumble and hadn't flinched. He was old, even by werewolf standards, and the scars covering his arms told the story of every year he'd survived. He looked at Celine the way a man looks at a weapon he doesn't know how to use. Everyone out, now. The room emptied in seconds. Only Mira remained, standing between Celine and the Alpha, like a woman willing to die on principle alone. Corrigan's expression softened slightly. You too, Mira. This is pack business. She's been mine since she was 4 years old. That makes her my business. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Corrigan nodded once, and Mira relaxed fractionally. The Alpha approached slowly, hands visible, posture carefully neutral. Celine realized with a jolt that he was afraid of her. Not for her, of her. Do you know what those marks mean, girl? Celine's throat was dry. No. Liar. But Corrigan didn't press it. He circled her instead, examining the marks from every angle. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Older. How much pain are you in? It's manageable. Another lie. She was burning from the inside out, every nerve ending singing a note just slightly off key. But orphans learned early not to show weakness, and habits carved in childhood went bone deep. Corrigan stopped in front of her. The Luna mark hasn't appeared in 2 centuries. The legends say it belongs to the reincarnated soul of the first Luna Queen, the one who was murdered by the Alpha King's bloodline. I know the stories. Everyone knew the stories. They were carved into the foundations of pack law, whispered by mothers to their children as warnings. The Luna Queen who'd been betrayed, the Alpha King who'd stolen immortality from her dying breath, the prophecy that promised the last Luna would return to balance the scales. Celine had never believed any of it. Prophecies were for people who mattered. You need to run, Corrigan said flatly. Tonight. Before the blood moon rises completely. Celine looked at him like he'd started speaking a foreign language. Run where? Anywhere. The marks on your skin just announced your presence to every Alpha in the continent. By dawn, there will be armies marching towards Silver Pine. Some will want to crown you. Others will want you dead. None of them will care how many of my pack die in the process. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. Mira made a small sound of protest, but Corrigan ignored her. I won't risk my wolves for a prophecy that may or may not be real. You go now. You go quietly. And maybe, the others won't connect you to Silver Pine before you're gone. The practical part of Celine's brain knew he was right. The orphan part, the part that had spent 23 years being useful and invisible and grateful for scraps, wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to matter enough to be worth protecting. She didn't say any of that. Instead, she asked, "Where will I go?" That earned her something that might have been respect in the Alpha's eyes. "North. To Blackmore Keep." Mira went pale. "You're sending her to him? To the Alpha King?" Corrigan's jaw tightened. "He's the only one strong enough to protect her from what's coming, and according to the prophecy, he's also the only one she can kill." The words hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Celine felt the pull then, for the first time consciously recognizing what her instincts had been screaming since she woke up. North. Something north was calling to her, had been calling to her, a hook buried deep in her chest pulling her toward something inevitable. "The bond," she whispered. Corrigan nodded grimly. "The mate bond. You're his girl, fated and sealed, which means you're the single most dangerous person in the kingdom right now." Celine looked down at her marked hands. The silver light pulsed steady as a heartbeat, beautiful and wrong and utterly beyond her control. "What if I don't want this? Then you're smarter than most." Corrigan turned toward the door, done with the conversation. "You have until midnight to be gone from my territory. After that, I can't help you." He left. The door closed behind him with a sound like a cell locking. Mira moved immediately, pulling Celine to her feet with hands that shook. "We need to pack. Food, water, something warm. I can't do this." The words came out smaller than Celine intended. Mira stopped, really looked at her, and for a moment the mask of competence cracked. "I know, sweetheart, but you don't have a choice." Celine wanted to laugh. She'd never had a choice. Not when her parents died. Not when she'd been dumped at the orphanage. Not in any of the 1,000 small ways she'd learned to make herself smaller, quieter, more convenient for everyone around her. The marks on her skin flared brighter. Maybe that was about to change. Kael felt her decide to run. The bond was still new, still forming, but already he could sense the shape of her emotions, if not the specific thoughts. Fear, anger, determination sharp as broken glass. Smart girl, stupid girl. Running wouldn't save her, but at least it might keep her alive long enough for him to reach her first. The strategy room in Blackmore Keep had once been a war chamber, and tonight it felt like one again. Maps covered every surface, marked with territories and pack positions, and the 100 small details that separated victory from massacre. Marcus stood at the center of it all, coordinating the Shadow Guard with the efficiency of a man who'd commanded armies when most of the current alphas were still pups. Reports were flooding in from every direction. The Eastern Alliance had mobilized. The Western packs were fortifying their borders. The Southern territories, always volatile, had erupted into open warfare as rival alphas fought for the right to claim the last Luna first. The continent was tearing itself apart, and the night was still young. "She's moving north out of Silver Pine," Marcus reported, reading from a hastily scrawled note. "On foot, alone." Kael's hand tightened on the edge of the table. Corrigan sent her away. Smart of him. Keeps his pack out of the crossfire. For now. Kael studied the map, calculating distances and possibilities. How many know her location? Too many. We've intercepted 3 separate groups already moving toward Silver Pine. The Eastern Alliance sent runners, the Western Coalition deployed scouts, and the Southern packs are chaos incarnate as always. Kael's jaw tightened. He'd spent 2 centuries keeping the Southern territories from descending into complete anarchy, and in a single night all that work was burning. Marcus leaned closer, voice dropping. "We could let them fight each other, thin the herds before they become a real problem, and let my mate walk through a war zone?" The words came out harder than intended, edges sharpened by the bond pulling tight in his chest. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "So we're acknowledging she's your mate now?" "I'm acknowledging she's the last Luna, and therefore my responsibility. The distinction is important." The older man's expression said he didn't believe that for a second, but he was smart enough not to push. "What are your orders? Deploy everything. I want the Shadow Guard forming a perimeter around her position. Anyone who gets close doesn't get back up. And send word to the packs. Any alpha who moves against the Luna moves against me. That's a declaration of war against half the continent." Kael met his general's eyes. "I'm the Alpha King. I'm always at war. Marcus nodded slowly, accepting what couldn't be changed. And when we reach her? Kael looked back at the map, at the small mark indicating where his mate was running through the wilderness alone and afraid, and marked for death by prophecy and politics. We bring her home, he said quietly, whether she wants to come or not. Celine made it 6 miles before the first hunter found her. She was following the river north, using the water to mask her scent the way Mira had taught her. The older woman had pressed a bag into her hands before she left. Food, a knife, matches, and a silver pendant that was probably worth more than anything Celine had ever owned. For luck, Mira had whispered, though the look in her eyes said she didn't believe luck would be enough. The hunter came from downwind, silent as smoke. Celine only knew he was there because the marks on her arms flared hot enough to sear, warning her a heartbeat before the attack came. She threw herself sideways. Claws raked the air where her throat had been, and then she was rolling, coming up with the knife in her hand and no idea how to use it. Beyond the sharp end goes in the other person. The hunter was young, maybe 20, with the wild eyes of someone who'd never expected to die. He circled her like predators do, grinning with too many teeth. "The last Luna," he said. "You're smaller than the legends promised." Celine's heart was trying to break through her ribs. "I don't want to fight you. Then don't. Just come with me. My alpha will treat you well." "Which alpha? Does it matter?" It did. It mattered more than anything. Because some alphas wanted her crowned and others wanted her dead, and all of them saw her as a thing to be claimed rather than a person trying desperately to survive. The hunter lunged. Celine moved on instinct, bringing the knife up, and was shocked when it connected. The blade sank into his shoulder, not deep enough to kill, but enough to hurt. He howled, staggering back, and Celine ran. The forest swallowed her whole. Trees that had seemed beautiful in daylight became a maze of shadows and reaching branches. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The marks on her arms lit her path, silver glow painting everything in shades of moonlight. Behind her, the hunter was howling for his pack. Celine ran faster. She didn't see the cliff until she was 3 steps from the edge. Her momentum carried her forward, feet skidding in loose dirt, arms windmilling desperately for balance. For a breathless second, she thought she might actually make it, might actually pull back from the drop. Then hands grabbed her from behind and yanked her backward. Celine's scream died as she hit the ground hard, rolling, the knife lost somewhere in the dark. She came up swinging anyway, fists connecting with solid muscle, and heard a grunt of surprise. "Easy." The voice was male, unfamiliar, and far too calm. "I'm not here to hurt you." Celine didn't stop fighting. Every orphan learned the same lesson. Trust was a luxury that got you killed. Her attacker, Savior, caught her wrists with embarrassing ease. He was big, she registered distantly. Broad-shouldered and scarred with dark hair and eyes that reflected the light from her marks. "My name is Marcus," he said patiently, like he had all the time in the world. "General of the Shadow Guard. The Alpha King sent me to find you." Celine went very still. "Kael Draven sent you." "He did." "To kill me?" Marcus actually smiled at that, quick and humorless. "If he wanted you dead, Luna, you'd be dead. He wants you safe, which means you're coming with me. Now." The hunter's howls were getting closer. More voices joined them, a chorus of wolves hunting in the dark. Marcus heard them too. His expression went hard. "We need to move." "Can you run?" Celine nodded. She didn't trust her voice. "Good." He released her wrists, stood in one fluid motion, offered her a hand up. "Stay close. Don't stop. And whatever you do, don't use your power. I don't have any. You do. You just don't know it yet. The marks on your arms aren't just decorative, they're the key to abilities that could level this forest. So until the Alpha King teaches you control, keep that power locked down tight." He turned and started running. Celine followed because there was no other choice, because the alternative was facing the hunters alone, because some part of her recognized that Marcus meant what he said about protection. They moved through the forest like ghosts. Marcus set a brutal pace, never slowing, never looking back to see if Celine was keeping up. She was, barely, lungs burning and legs screaming, but she was. The hunter pack found them anyway. They came from 3 directions at once, coordinated and clever. Marcus swore, drew 2 blades that seemed to materialize from nowhere, and suddenly the night was full of violence. Celine had never seen anyone fight like that. Marcus moved like water, like inevitability, each strike precise and utterly lethal. Hunters fell. Blood sprayed black in the moonlight. And through it all, Marcus kept himself between Celine and anything that might hurt her. "More coming," he snapped. "We're not making it out on foot." "Then what?" But Marcus was already shifting. His body rippled, bones restructuring in ways that should have been impossible. And suddenly, where a man had stood was something else entirely. A wolf, yes, but massive, powerful, with gray fur and eyes that burned with intelligence no animal should possess. He knelt. The meaning was clear. Celine had never ridden a wolf before. She climbed on anyway, fingers tangling in thick fur, thighs gripping tight. Marcus surged to his feet and ran. The world became a blur of speed and shadow. Trees whipped past. The hunter pack fell behind, their howls fading into the distance. And still Marcus ran, tireless as the moon overhead, carrying his precious cargo toward the dark mountains that marked the territory of the Alpha King. Celine held on and tried not to think about what waited for her there. Tried not to feel the pull of the bond growing stronger with each mile north. Tried not to remember that prophecy said she was destined to kill the man she'd been born to love. The blood moon rose higher, painting everything crimson. And in Blackmoor Keep, the Alpha King stood at his window and felt his mate coming closer. The war for the last Luna had begun. And nobody, not the hunters, not the rival alphas, not even Kale himself, had any idea how it would end. The gates of Blackmoor Keep rose from the mountain like the ribs of some ancient beast, black iron twisted into shapes that might have been decorative once, but now just looked like warnings. Celine felt them before she saw them, a cold pressure against her chest that had nothing to do with the altitude. Marcus slowed as they approached, his massive wolf form dropping to a trot. Guards materialized from the shadows, dozens of them, armed and watching with eyes that reflected torchlight like coins at the bottom of a well. None of them spoke. They just opened the gates and let the darkness swallow them whole. The courtyard inside was worse than the approach. Too big, too empty, designed to make anyone entering feel small and exposed. Celine slid off Marcus's back on legs that barely held her weight, every muscle screaming from the ride. The marks on her arms pulsed steady as a heartbeat, silver light painting the stones around her feet. Marcus shifted back to human form with that same impossible fluidity. Someone threw him a cloak, and he caught it without looking, wrapped it around himself with the ease of long practice. When he turned to face Celine, his expression was carefully neutral in a way that made her stomach clench. "He's waiting in the throne room." Celine's throat was dry. "Does he know I'm here?" "He's known since the moment you crossed into his territory." Marcus started walking, not checking to see if she followed. "The bond works both ways, Luna. You feel him, he feels you. Distance doesn't matter much when fate's involved." The castle interior was all stone and shadow, corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Torches burned in brackets along the walls, but their light didn't reach far, like the darkness here was thicker than it should be. Celine caught glimpses of things as they passed. Armories, training rooms, chambers whose purposes she couldn't guess. Everything spoke of violence held in careful check, power restrained but never forgotten. They climbed stairs that seemed designed to exhaust anyone not born to climb them. Celine's legs burned, but she kept pace, refusing to show weakness even though her body was screaming for rest. The marks on her arms flared hotter with each step higher, like they were responding to proximity. At the top of the stairs was a door, not massive, not ornate, just solid black wood bound in iron. 2 guards stood on either side, both watching Celine with expressions she couldn't read. Marcus stopped. "From here you go alone." "Why?" "Because he's your mate and I'm not. And there are some conversations that don't need witnesses." Celine wanted to argue, wanted to demand he stay, wanted backup, wanted anything but to walk through that door alone to face the man prophecy said she was meant to kill. But Marcus was already leaving, footsteps echoing back down the stairs, and the guards weren't moving. She reached for the door handle. Her hand was shaking. She made it stop through sheer willpower and pushed the door open. The throne room was smaller than she expected, and somehow more terrible for it. No grand hall, no audience chamber designed to impress visiting dignitaries. Just a room of black stone with a single chair at the far end, and a man sitting in it watching her with eyes that burned like coals in the dim light. Alpha King Kale Draven. He was younger than she expected. No, not younger. Ageless. like time had touched him and then thought better of it. Dark hair, sharp features, a body built for violence and barely restrained. Scars marked his arms, his throat, small pale lines that spoke of battles won and prices paid. He wore black, simple clothing that did nothing to soften the edges. And when he looked at her, Celine felt the weight of 200 years pressing down. The bond slammed into her like a fist, not gentle, not gradual, just there, a chain wrapped around her ribs pulling tight enough to bruise. She stumbled, caught herself, and saw his jaw clench in response. They stared at each other across the empty room. Neither spoke. The silence stretched and stretched until Celine thought she might scream just to break it. Cale moved first. He stood, and the motion was so controlled it looked like violence held in check. When he spoke, his voice was rough, like he didn't use it often and didn't care if it worked right. "You shouldn't have come here." Not exactly the greeting Celine had prepared for. "I didn't have much choice. Your general didn't ask politely. Marcus was protecting you. From the other packs. From yourself." Something flickered in his eyes, too fast to identify. "From me? Are you planning to kill me?" The question hung between them like smoke. Cale's expression didn't change, but Celine saw his hands tighten on the arms of the throne, knuckles going white with pressure. "The prophecy says you're going to kill me. So the question is whether I should beat you to it." Celine's heart was trying to break through her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. And you're still alive. So I guess we both know my answer." He moved then, coming down from the throne with steps that ate the distance between them. Celine held her ground even though every instinct was screaming at her to run. Cale stopped just outside arm's reach, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, smell leather and smoke, and something else she couldn't name. "Show me your arms." It wasn't a request. Celine raised her arms anyway because what choice did she have? Watched Cale's face as he studied the marks covering her skin. His expression was unreadable, but she saw his breathing change, saw something that might have been recognition or grief or rage flash across his features. "Do you know what these are?" "The Luna mark. Proof I'm the reincarnation of the queen your bloodline murdered." His eyes snapped to hers. "Is that what they told you?" "That's what the legends say. Legends are stories written by survivors. They're not always true." He reached out like he might touch the marks, then stopped himself. "These marks mean you're the last Luna, yes. They mean you have power older than any living pack. But they don't make you a victim. Then what do they make me?" "Dangerous." The word landed like a stone in still water. Celine pulled her arms back, suddenly very aware of how close they were standing, how the bond was pulling tighter with each breath. "I don't want this," she said quietly. "Any of it. The marks, the prophecy, the destiny, everyone keeps throwing at me like I asked for it." Cale's laugh was bitter. "You think I wanted an immortal mate who's prophesied to kill me? You think I spent 2 centuries building this kingdom just to hand someone the keys to destroying it? Then let me go." "Can't do that." "Why not?" "Because every alpha from here to the coast wants you dead or married or both. And the only thing keeping them from tearing this continent apart is knowing you're under my protection." Cale stepped back, creating distance that felt deliberate. "You stay here. You learn to control your power. And maybe, we both survive long enough to figure out what the prophecy actually means." Celine wanted to argue, wanted to scream that she wasn't some prize to be claimed or protected, that her life belonged to her and nobody else. But the exhaustion was catching up with her now, bone deep and absolute, and standing took more effort than she had left. Cale saw it. His expression shifted fractionally, something almost like concern bleeding through the control. "Marcus will show you to your rooms. You'll have guards, for your protection." "Or to keep me prisoner?" "Both." He turned away, dismissing her, then stopped. "One more thing." Celine waited. "The bond will get stronger. You'll feel what I feel, want what I want. It's not romantic, it's not gentle, it's just biology and fate tangling together. If you fight it too hard, it'll break you. If you give in completely, it'll break me. So we find a middle ground or we both go down. And if I decide I'd rather fulfill the prophecy, kill you like I'm supposed to?" Cale looked at her over his shoulder, and for the first time Celine saw something raw in his eyes. Something that might have been hope or fear or both twisted together. Then at least one of us gets what we want. He left. The door closed behind him with a sound like a cell locking, and Celine stood alone in the throne room, marked and mated and utterly trapped, while outside the blood moon climbed higher and the kingdoms prepared for war. Attaque. The rooms they gave her were a cage dressed as comfort, large, well-furnished, with windows that overlooked the mountains and doors that locked from the outside. Celine tested them immediately, of course, and wasn't surprised when they didn't budge. A servant had brought food, real food, not the scraps orphans learned to be grateful for. Bread and meat and fruit that still held the warmth of the kitchen. Celine's stomach growled, but she couldn't bring herself to eat. Every instinct said accepting hospitality was accepting the chains that came with it. She went to the window instead, looked out over Kael's kingdom. Blackmore Keep sprawled below her, all sharp angles and defensive positions. Beyond it, the mountains rose like walls, and beyond those, the forest stretched dark and endless. Somewhere out there, the other packs were moving, plotting, preparing to claim or kill her. The marks on her arms pulsed brighter. Celine pressed her palm against the glass, felt the cold seep through. She'd spent 23 years making herself invisible, useful, the kind of person people forgot about the moment she left the room. Safe through insignificance. Now she was marked, mated, and the center of a prophecy that promised blood. The door opened without warning. Celine spun, hands coming up defensively, and found herself facing a woman who looked like she could kill someone with nothing but a hard stare. She was older than Celine, maybe 30, with black hair pulled back tight and scars that said she'd earned her position through violence. She wore leather armor that had seen actual use, and her eyes swept the room with the efficiency of someone checking for threats. "I'm Sarah, captain of the King's Guard." The words came out flat, no friendliness in them. Celine lowered her hand slowly. "Am I supposed to be impressed?" "You're supposed to not be an idiot." Sarah closed the door behind her, leaned against it with deliberate casualness. "You're under the Alpha King's protection, which means you're my problem. So we're going to establish some rules. I don't remember agreeing to rules. You stopped getting a choice when you walked through those gates." Sarah's expression didn't change. "Rule 1. You don't leave these rooms without an escort. Rule 2. You don't use your power where anyone can see it. Rule 3. You don't cause problems that make my job harder. And if I break these rules, then I get creative with discipline." The threat was delivered without heat, which somehow made it worse. Celine held Sarah's gaze, refusing to look away first. This woman was testing her, she realized, checking to see if the last Luna would fold under pressure or push back. "What if I don't want protection?" "Doesn't matter what you want." Sarah pushed off the door, prowled the room like a wolf checking territory. "Half the continent wants you dead. The other half wants you married to their alpha so they can claim your power. You think you'll survive a week out there alone? I made it this far. You made it 6 miles before Marcus had to save you. Don't mistake luck for skill." The words hit harder because they were true. Celine's hand drifted to her arm, where the knife wound from the hunter had already healed. Another gift from the marks, apparently. Another sign she was becoming something other than human. "Why do you care? About protecting me?" "I don't." Sarah's honesty was almost refreshing. "I care about the king, and keeping you alive keeps him stable. So you stay locked in this tower like a good little Luna, and I get to sleep at night knowing the continent isn't descending into complete chaos. Has anyone ever told you you're terrible at making people feel welcome?" That earned her something that might have been a smile, quick and sharp. All the time. Consider it a gift. False comfort gets people killed. Honesty just makes them angry. Sarah moved toward the door, done with whatever test she'd come to administer. Celine spoke before she could leave. "What's he like?" "Really?" The captain paused, hand on the doorknob. "Dangerous question, Luna. I'm asking anyway." For a long moment, Sarah didn't answer. Then, "He's the kind of man who spent 2 centuries building a kingdom that won't crumble the moment he dies. The kind who burned libraries and killed scholars to prevent a prophecy from coming true. The kind who hates what he is and does it anyway because the alternative is worse." Celine absorbed that. "And now I'm here," the prophecy he tried to stop. "Yeah." Sarah opened the door. So maybe start understanding that your existence is the one thing in 200 years that genuinely scares him, and scared men make terrible choices. She left. The door locked from the outside, and Celine stood alone again, wondering exactly what terrible choices she'd forced by being born wrong. Cale didn't sleep. Couldn't, with the bond burning under his skin and his mate locked 3 floors down like a prisoner he couldn't afford to release. Instead, he stood in his private chambers staring at maps that didn't have answers and trying not to feel the pull toward her that got stronger with each passing hour. Marcus entered without knocking. Privilege of age and position. The Eastern Alliance is mobilizing, 20 packs, maybe more. They'll be at our borders in 3 days. Let them come. Kyle didn't look up from the maps. We've held this territory against worse, not while half your forces were deployed protecting a single person. Marcus moved to stand beside him, studying the same maps with eyes that had watched empires rise and fall. This is different, Kyle. The Luna changes everything. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a man trying to hold water in his hands. The harder you grip, the faster it drains. Kale's jaw tightened. What would you have me do? Send her away? Let the other alphas tear her apart while I watch? I'd have you remember that prophecies exist for a reason. That girl down there is either your salvation or your execution. The closer she gets, the more you risk. And if I push her away? Kale finally looked at his general. Let some of the exhaustion show. She's my mate, Marcus. The bond isn't optional. Fighting it will destroy us both. Then maybe the prophecy was right. Maybe you were always meant to fall. The words hung between them like drawn blades. Kale wanted to argue, wanted to rage that 2 centuries of survival meant something, that he'd earned the right to shape his own fate. But Marcus was old enough to remember when Kyle first took the throne. Young and angry, and convinced immortality was a gift instead of a curse. She asked me to let her go. Smart girl. I said no. Stupid king. Marcus sighed, some of the severity leaving his expression. How bad is the bond? Getting worse. Kale's hand drifted to his chest, pressed against the ache that lived there now. I can feel her fear, her anger, her determination to survive this. It's like having someone else's emotions carved into my ribs. And the need to claim her? Kale didn't answer. Didn't need to. Marcus had been there during Kael's first mate bond, centuries ago, before immortality and prophecy and all the choices that led here. He knew how the instincts worked, how biology wrapped around emotion until you couldn't separate one from the other. The claiming instinct is part of pack law, old as the species itself. A drive to protect, to possess, to mark what's yours so thoroughly that no rival could mistake it. For most wolves, it was manageable, something that faded with time and proximity. But for an alpha king with a mate marked by prophecy and hunted by half the continent, it was a slow poison with no antidote. Keep your distance, Marcus said quietly, at least until you figure out if she's the weapon or the wielder. And if I can't, then we start planning for a funeral. Yours or hers, I'm not sure which. Marcus left. Kale stood alone in his chambers and felt the bond pull tighter, felt Celine's presence like a hook in his chest, and wondered if 200 years of survival had taught him anything useful or just how to postpone the inevitable. Gimbal. The days blurred together in a haze of isolation and waiting. Celine's world shrank to her rooms, the courtyard where Sarah allowed her brief walks, and the crushing awareness of Kael's presence somewhere in the castle. She felt him through the bond constantly now. His anger, his exhaustion, the iron control he kept wrapped around emotions too big for one person to contain. He never came to see her. That felt deliberate. Sarah was her only regular company, checking in twice daily with updates Celine suspected were carefully filtered. The Eastern Alliance was 3 days away, then 2, then camped just beyond Blackmoor's borders. Other packs were moving too, circling like vultures, waiting for weakness. On the 5th day, Celine's power woke up properly. She'd been standing at the window watching storm clouds gather over the mountains when the marks on her arms flared hot enough to burn. Pain lanced through her, not physical but deeper, like something fundamental was trying to claw its way out through her skin. Celine gasped, stumbled, and the power answered. Silver light exploded from her palms, so bright she couldn't see, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but feel it pouring out of her in waves. The window shattered, the furniture splintered, cracks spiderwebbed across the stone walls, and still the power kept coming, endless and terrible and utterly beyond her control. She was screaming. When had she started screaming? Hands grabbed her shoulders, strong and steady. A voice cut through the chaos, rough and commanding. Breathe. Just breathe. Kyle. Of course it was Kyle. Celine could feel him through the bond now, his presence wrapping around hers like armor, helping her pull the power back in. She followed his lead because she didn't know how to do anything else, dragged the silver light back into her skin, inch by agonizing inch. When it finally stopped, she was on her knees and Kyle was kneeling in front of her, hands still on her shoulders, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. What happened? Your power. He released her, stood, created distance. It's growing faster than I expected. You expected this? The last Luna's abilities don't come all at once. They build gradually, usually over years. Kale looked around the destroyed room, expression unreadable. This is faster, stronger. You're either the most powerful Luna in history, or the power is trying to kill you. Celine's hands were shaking. She made them stop. Great. Which is it? Haven't decided yet. He turned back to her, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Celine saw something other than control in his face. We need to start your training, now, before you accidentally level this castle. Training? You have power older than any living pack. That means you need to learn to use it before it uses you. Kale moved toward the door, obviously expecting her to follow. Get up, Luna. We're done hiding. Celine stood on legs that barely held her weight. Where are we going? To the one place in this castle where you can't destroy anything that matters. He led her down, always down, through corridors that got older the deeper they went. The stone changed from worked blocks to rough-hewn caves, the torches giving way to crystalline formations that glowed with their own pale light. This was the mountain's heart, Celine realized. The foundation Blackmore Keep was built on. They reached a chamber carved from living rock, massive and empty except for symbols etched into every surface. Old symbols, older than written language, depicting wolves and moons and power. Kale stopped in the center. This is where the first Alpha Kings were crowned, where the pack bonds were forged. The stone here remembers power. It can take whatever you throw at it. Celine looked around, trying not to feel small in the vast space. And what exactly am I supposed to do? Learn control, learn limits, learn that the power in your veins is a tool, not a master. He moved to stand across from her, arms crossed. Unless you'd rather keep accidentally destroying things until you hurt someone who matters. The words landed like a challenge. Celine straightened despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. Fine. Teach me. Kale's expression shifted into something that might have been approval. Show me what you can do. Don't hold back, don't think, just let the power out. Celine hesitated. The memory of losing control was too fresh, too terrifying. Now, Luna. She reached for the marks, felt them respond immediately. Silver light crawled up her arms, across her chest, spreading like fire across dry wood. This time she tried to direct it, tried to shape it into something useful. The light condensed into her palms, bright and hot and eager. Celine threw it at the far wall. The impact was thunder and lightning combined, raw force that made the mountain shake. When the light faded, the symbols on the wall were glowing white-hot, absorbing and containing what she'd thrown. Again, Kale said, Celine threw power again. And again. Each time different, testing what she could do. Sharp strikes, wide waves, focused beams that carved lines into ancient stone. The marks on her arms burned brighter with each release, like they were teaching her, showing her what she was capable of becoming. Kale watched it all with an expression she couldn't read. When she finally stopped, exhausted and trembling, he nodded once. You're stronger than I thought. That's unfortunate. Celine managed a bitter laugh. Not the compliment I was hoping for. It's not supposed to be. He moved closer, and Celine became very aware of how alone they were, how far from anyone who might intervene. The stronger you get, the more dangerous you become. To me. To yourself. To everyone who thinks they can control you. I don't want to be controlled. Nobody ever does. But control is what keeps you alive. Kale stopped just within arm's reach, close enough that the bond between them pulled tight. The pack instincts, the claiming instinct, the need to possess. Those aren't flaws, Luna. They're survival mechanisms. You think I want to feel this way about someone I barely know? Someone prophecy says will kill me? Celine's breath caught. Then why keep me here? Because the alternative is letting you die. And apparently, I'm not ready to do that yet. His voice dropped, rough, with something that might have been anger or grief. So we train. We learn control. And maybe we both survive long enough to figure out what the prophecy actually means instead of letting it dictate our choices. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Celine should have stepped back, created distance, protected herself from whatever this was becoming. Instead, she held her ground and asked the question that had been burning since she arrived. Do you feel it? The bond? Kael's expression went carefully blank. Yes. How bad is it? Bad enough. He turned away, breaking the moment. That's why you're learning control. Because if you can't master your power, I'll have to make choices neither of us will survive. He left her there in the ancient chamber, alone with glowing symbols and the weight of everything unsaid. And Celine stood in the heart of the mountain, marked and powerful and terrified, while above them the blood moon burned brighter, and the Eastern Alliance reached the borders and war stopped being a possibility and became a certainty. The training continued. Every day, Kael dragged Celine down to the chamber, pushed her harder, demanded more. She learned to shape the power, to control it, to use it without destroying herself in the process. The marks on her arms spread further up her shoulders, across her back, mapping her transformation from orphan to weapon. And through it all, the bond between them grew stronger. Celine felt Kael's presence constantly now, his anger when the Eastern Alliance sent demands, his exhaustion from days without sleep, his carefully controlled need that burned under everything else. She knew when he was near, when he was far, what mood he was in before he spoke a word. It was invasive and intimate and absolutely terrifying. On the 10th day, Marcus came for her instead of Kael. The Alpha King requests your presence in the war room, not a request. Celine followed him up, through corridors she'd started to memorize, to a chamber filled with maps and generals and an atmosphere thick enough to choke on. Kael stood at the center, dark circles under his eyes, 3 days of stubble on his jaw. He looked like a man holding himself together through sheer force of will. When he saw her, something flickered in his expression, relief maybe, or just acknowledgement that she'd come. The Eastern Alliance has issued an ultimatum. Kael's voice cut through the room's tension. Surrender the last Luna or face war. Every eye in the room turned to Celine. She held herself still, refused to flinch under the weight of their stares. What did you tell them? She asked. That they can come take you if they're feeling suicidal. Kael's expression was carved from stone. But they have numbers and momentum. We have defensive positions and your power. It's going to be bloody. Then let me go. Celine stepped forward, ignoring the murmurs from the assembled wolves. Give them what they want. End this before people die for a prophecy that might not even be real. Kael moved so fast she didn't see it coming. One moment he was across the room, the next he was inches away, fury radiating off him in waves. You think I spent 10 days training you just to hand you over to them? You think I'm going to let some Eastern Alpha claim you, mark you, use you like the weapon they think you are? His hands were on her shoulders, gripped tight enough to bruise. The bond between them roared to life, flooding Celine with his rage and fear, and the desperate need to keep her safe, even if it meant burning down the continent. Everyone out. The generals fled. Even Marcus hesitated only a moment before leaving them alone. Kael and Celine stood in the empty war room, too close, the bond pulling tight enough to hurt. His breathing was harsh, uncontrolled. His eyes burned with something that looked like panic barely restrained. You don't understand, he said roughly. What the bond means, what I'll do to keep you safe. Then explain it to me. I can't let you go. The words came out broken. I've tried. Every logical part of me knows you'd be safer running, that keeping you here just paints a bigger target. But the bond won't let me. The instinct to protect you, to claim you, to mark you so thoroughly that no rival could mistake what you are. It's stronger than reason, stronger than prophecy. Celine's heart was hammering. That's not protection, Kael, that's possession. It's survival. His grip on her shoulders tightened fractionally. For both of us. You think the Eastern Alliance will treat you better? They'll crown you queen and lock you in a gilded cage while they use your power to conquer everyone who opposes them. At least here you have choice. Do I? She met his eyes, refusing to back down. Because it feels like the only choice I have is which cage to live in. Kael's expression cracked, something raw bleeding through. Then choose this one. Choose me. Not because of the bond or the prophecy, but because I'm the one alpha who's terrified enough of your power to never use it against you. The honesty in his voice nearly broke her. Celine searched his face, looking for deception, finding only exhaustion and desperation and the kind of truth that came from being pushed past every limit. What happens if I stay? We fight, we train, we survive, and maybe we rewrite the prophecy instead of letting it rewrite us. And if I'm still meant to kill you? Kael released her shoulders, stepped back, creating distance that felt like surrender. Then at least it'll be your choice, not fate's. The war room door burst open. Sarah stood there, breathing hard, blood on her armor that wasn't hers. They're here. The Eastern Alliance just breached the outer defenses. We're out of time. Kael's expression went cold and hard, the vulnerability vanishing behind the mask of the Alpha King. He looked at Celine one last time. Stay in the keep. Let us handle this. No. Celine's power flared under her skin, responding to her decision. You trained me for a reason. Let me fight. You're not ready. Then I'll learn fast. She stepped toward the door, toward the sound of battle erupting outside. I'm done being the prize everyone fights over. If there's going to be a war for the last Luna, I'm going to be part of it. Kael caught her arm. His eyes burned with something between pride and terror. Don't die, he said roughly. I'm not ready to find out if the bond survives that. Then don't die either. Because if you do, I'll drag you back from whatever hell you end up in just to kill you myself. Something that might have been a smile crossed his face, quick and fierce. That's my Luna. They ran toward the battle together, toward the armies converging on Blackmore Keep, toward the moment when prophecy stopped being words and became blood. And behind them, unnoticed by anyone, the blood moon reached its apex, turning the entire sky crimson. The war for the last Luna had finally begun. And in the chaos of that first clash, while Celine unleashed silver fire and Kael tore through enemy wolves with brutal efficiency, a figure watched from the shadows. A man in priest's robes, ancient and smiling, who'd been waiting 200 years for this exact moment. The prophecy was unfolding perfectly. And nobody, not the Alpha King, not the last Luna, not even the armies dying in the courtyard, realized they were all dancing to a script written centuries ago by someone who'd never stopped pulling the strings. Blood painted the courtyard stones in patterns that told stories of violence and desperation. Celine stood in the center of it all, silver fire pouring from her hands in waves that turned attacking wolves to ash before they could reach her. The power sang through her veins now, no longer a stranger, but something she was learning to wield with brutal efficiency. Around her, Kael's forces held the line. Barely. The Eastern Alliance had brought numbers, 3 packs for everyone defending Blackmore, and they fought with the kind of recklessness that came from believing victory was prophesied. Wolves clashed in the dark, claws and teeth against steel and strategy, while above them the blood moon watched with its crimson eye. Kael fought like a man with nothing left to lose. Celine felt him through the bond even in the chaos, his rage, his focus, the cold calculation that kept him alive when lesser alphas would have fallen. He moved through the battle like water through cracks, finding weaknesses and exploiting them, and everywhere he passed, wolves fell and didn't rise again. Marcus was beside him, a veteran fighting wars that most of the younger wolves couldn't even imagine. Sarah commanded the rear guard, her voice cutting through the din with orders that kept the defensive line from collapsing entirely. They were holding. Just barely. But holding. Then the first explosion ripped through the eastern wall. The sound was thunder without lightning, force without warning. Stone that had stood for centuries crumbled like sand. Wolves scattered, screaming, as the wall collapsed inward and buried defenders under tons of rubble. Celine's head snapped toward the breach. That wasn't normal siege equipment. That was power. Old power. The kind that shouldn't exist anymore. Kael felt it too. She saw him turn, saw the recognition in his face shift to horror as figures poured through the smoking gap. Not just Eastern Alliance wolves. Something else. Something worse. The first one that reached the courtyard was massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with fur that seemed to drink the moonlight and eyes that burned red as the sky above. It opened its mouth and howled, and the sound was wrong, layered with harmonics that made Celine's bones ache. Cursed wolves. Marcus's voice came through the bond somehow, rough with shock. I thought they were all dead. Kael's response was immediate and vicious. He launched himself at the nearest cursed wolf, moving faster than Celine had ever seen him move. They collided with the force of avalanches, two predators that had evolved specifically to kill things that wouldn't die easily. But there were more coming, a dozen, 2 dozen, pouring through the breach like a flood of teeth and malice. Celine threw silver fire at the closest one. It screamed, a sound that was almost human, and kept coming. Her second blast took it in the chest and finally dropped it, but 3 more were already replacing it. This was wrong. The Eastern Alliance shouldn't have cursed wolves. Nobody should. They were remnants of the old wars, experiments in creating soldiers that felt no pain and knew no mercy. Every pack had agreed to destroy them centuries ago because they couldn't be controlled. Someone had been lying. Fall back, Kael roared. To the inner keep, now! The defenders retreated in organized chaos, discipline barely holding against the tide of horror pouring through the breach. Celine moved with them, throwing power at anything that got too close, and felt Kael at her back the entire way, protecting her. Always protecting her even when his kingdom was burning. They made it to the inner keep doors just as another explosion tore through the outer courtyard. The entire eastern section of Blackmoor collapsed, taking dozens of wolves with it. The sound of stones screaming drowned out everything else for a moment that stretched into eternity. Inside, Kael practically threw Celine through the doors. Marcus, get those gates closed. The massive iron gates slammed shut. Bars fell into place. Magic older than memory sealed them. Wards that had protected this place since the first stones were laid. It would hold. It had to hold. Kael leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Blood covered his armor, most of it not his. Around them, the surviving defenders gathered, maybe half the force they'd started with. Too few. Not enough. Sarah appeared from a side corridor supporting a wounded wolf. Her expression was carved from stone, but Celine saw the fear underneath. The western wall is holding. South and north are secure. But we lost the entire eastern section. How many? Kael's voice was flat. Too many. Sarah's jaw tightened. And the cursed wolves are still coming. Whoever supplied them to the Alliance has dozens more in reserve. Kael's hand curled into a fist. He looked like a man watching 2 centuries of work crumble in a single night. The bond between them pulsed with his fury and frustration, and Celine felt every bit of it like it was her own. We need to know who's supplying them. Marcus stepped forward, bloodied but unbroken. The Eastern Alliance doesn't have that kind of power. Someone else is pulling strings. Before anyone could respond, a voice echoed through the keep. Not shouted, not even loud, just there somehow, sliding into their ears like oil. You always were too trusting, Kael. Every wolf in the room went still. Celine felt ice crawl down her spine because she knew that voice. She'd heard it in dreams, in the visions that came when the marks burned brightest. Old, ancient, wrong in ways she couldn't articulate. A door opened, not one they'd been watching. Just a door in the wall that hadn't been there a moment ago, and through it walked a man in priest's robes who looked like time had forgotten to kill him. He was smiling. Marcus moved first, weapon drawn, placing himself between the stranger and Kael. But the old priest just shook his head, almost fondly. Put that away, old friend. We both know you won't use it. The words hit like hammers. Marcus froze, confusion and recognition warring on his scarred face. The weapon didn't lower. Who are you? Kael's voice was dangerous, controlled, the tone of a king who'd killed for less than uninvited entry. The priest's smile widened. You don't remember? I suppose 200 years does blur the details. I was there, Kael. The night you took the throne. The night you murdered the Luna Queen and stole her immortality. The chamber went deathly silent. Every eye turned to Kael, looking for denial, for explanation, for anything that would make the accusation less real. Kael's expression didn't change. He met the priest's eyes with something that looked like recognition, dawning cold and terrible. Mordrin. You're supposed to be dead. I've been waiting. The priest, Mordrin, moved further into the room with steps that didn't quite touch the ground. Watching, planning, making sure everything unfolded exactly as the prophecy demanded. His gaze shifted to Celine. "Hello, Luna. You're more beautiful than the last time I killed you." The words punched through Celine's chest. The marks on her arms flared white-hot, responding to something in Mordrin's presence. Memories that weren't hers flooded her mind. A throne room, a betrayal, hands closing around her throat while someone she loved watched. "You." Her voice came out barely a whisper. "You killed the Luna Queen." I guided the blade. Mordrin's expression was almost paternal. But Kael's bloodline did the actual killing. That's important. The curse needed an alpha's hands to seal it properly. Kael had gone very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. "What did you do?" "What needed to be done?" "Immortality doesn't come free, boy. The Luna Queen's death powered the ritual that made you unkillable. But curses are tricky things. They need balance. So I built in a failsafe, a reincarnated Luna with the power to end what her death began." Mordrin gestured lazily toward Celine. 200 years of waiting, and finally she's exactly where she needs to be. Marcus stepped forward, weapon still raised. Why? Why orchestrate all of this? Because immortal kings grow complacent. They stop fighting, stop evolving. The packs were stagnating under Kael's rule. I needed chaos. War. The kind of conflict that would reshape the entire continent. And what better catalyst than the last Luna returning to kill the Alpha King who murdered her? Celine felt sick. The prophecy wasn't a warning. It was a script. Every step planned, every choice manipulated, leading them all toward this exact moment. Kael's breathing had gone shallow. "You used me. Used all of us. I gave you immortality and 2 centuries of power." Mordrin's smile never faltered. "All I asked in return was that you eventually die in exactly the right way to trigger the next phase. Really, you should be thanking me." The bond between Kael and Celine suddenly made terrible sense. Not fate bringing them together, but Mordrin's manipulation, steering them into position like pieces on a board. The marks on her arms, the timing of her awakening, even the attack by the Eastern Alliance, all of it engineered by someone who'd been pulling strings since before she was born. Marcus was shaking, weapon trembling in his grip. "You betrayed everything. Everyone. I ensured survival." Mordrin's tone sharpened. The packs were dying slowly, rotting from the inside. Now they'll be reborn in fire and blood. Better, stronger. Evolution doesn't happen in peace, Marcus. You, of all people, should understand that. Something in Marcus's expression cracked. The weapon lowered slightly. Celine felt Kael tense beside her, felt his sudden spike of suspicion through the bond. "No." The word came out broken. "Marcus, tell me you weren't part of this." Marcus didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Just stood there looking at Kael with the face of a man who'd carried a terrible secret for too long. Mordrin laughed, delighted. "He's been mine since the beginning. How do you think I got close enough to orchestrate the Luna Queen's death? Your most trusted general opened the door for me, literally and figuratively." The betrayal hit Kael like a physical blow. Celine felt it through the bond, felt something fundamental break inside him. 200 years of trust, of friendship, of fighting side by side, all of it poisoned now. "Marcus." Kael's voice was barely audible. "Why?" "Because he promised me it would save you." Marcus looked ancient suddenly, all those centuries weighing visible on his shoulders. "You were going to die, Kael. The Luna Queen's pack was rising, the old alphas were planning rebellion, and you were too young and too proud to see it coming. Mordrin offered immortality, a way to make you strong enough to survive anything. I just had to help him with one small ritual. One small ritual that required murdering an innocent woman. She wasn't innocent. Marcus's denial was desperate. She was planning to kill you, to tear down everything we'd built. So you killed her first and made me the weapon." Kael's hands were shaking. "Did you know? About the prophecy? About the Luna returning to end me?" "Not at first." Marcus's voice cracked. By the time I realized what Mordrin had really done, it was too late. The curse was sealed. I spent 2 centuries trying to prevent the Luna from awakening, hunting every lead, burning every text that might trigger the prophecy. I thought if I could just stop her from returning, you'd be safe. But I did return. Celine stepped forward, silver light crawling up her arms. And now we're all exactly where he wanted us. Mordrin clapped, slow and mocking. Exactly. The cursed wolves outside aren't from the Eastern Alliance. They're mine. I've been breeding them for decades, waiting for this moment. He gestured to the sealed doors. Right now they're tearing through your remaining defenders. By dawn, Blackmoor Keep will fall. Kael will have to choose. Let Celine kill him to break the curse and save what's left of his kingdom, or watch everyone he loves die protecting him. The choice wasn't a choice at all. It was another manipulation, another script forcing them into predetermined positions. Kael looked at Marcus with eyes that had gone dead. Get out! Kael, please! Get out before I kill you myself! Marcus stumbled backward like he'd been struck. For a moment he looked like he might argue, might try to explain further. Then he saw Kael's face, saw 2 centuries of friendship burning to ash, and fled. The silence he left behind was suffocating. Sarah broke it first, her voice cutting through the tension. We need to move. The cursed wolves will breach the inner keep within the hour. Let them come. Kael's tone was hollow. Without Marcus coordinating the defense, we won't hold anyway. Then we run. Sarah's desperation was showing through her professional mask. There are escape routes. Hidden passages. We can get you and the Luna out before... I'm done running. Kael turned to Celine and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. The prophecy says you can kill me, that your power combined with my cursed blood can break what Mordrin created. Is that true? Celine felt the mark's pulse in recognition. The knowledge was there, buried in her inherited memories. Yes. Then do it. The words hung between them like a blade. Outside, the sound of cursed wolves howling rose to a fever pitch. No. Celine's response was immediate, visceral. I won't be his weapon, won't follow his script. You don't have a choice. Kael moved closer, and the bond between them pulled so tight it hurt. Everyone I've trusted, everyone I thought I knew, they've been lying for 2 centuries. My entire existence is built on murder and manipulation. Maybe the prophecy is right. Maybe I should die. That's exactly what he wants you to think. Then what do you suggest? Kael's control was fracturing, centuries of discipline crumbling under the weight of betrayal. Because from where I'm standing, we have 2 options. You kill me and break the curse, or we all die when those things outside break through. There's always a third option. Celine grabbed his arm, felt his pulse racing under her fingers. We break the script. We refuse to play his game. If Mordrin wants me to kill you, then we make sure that never happens. And how exactly do we do that? By combining our power without the sacrifice. Celine's mind was racing, pieces falling into place. The curse needs an alpha's death to break. But what if we use my Luna power to rewrite the curse itself? Change the fundamental structure of what he created? That's impossible. Kael's voice carried no conviction. Nobody has that kind of power. The last Luna does. Celine's marks flared brighter, responding to her certainty. Mordrin said it himself. I have abilities older than any living pack. Maybe that includes rewriting curses built on stolen power. Mordrin laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber like breaking glass. Clever girl. But you're missing one critical detail. The curse isn't just in Kael. It's woven through every wolf who swore allegiance to him. Every pack bond, every oath of loyalty, all of it is tied to the immortality ritual. If you try to rewrite it, you'll kill thousands. The revelation landed like a stone in water, ripples spreading outward. Celine looked at Kael and saw the truth in his eyes. He'd known. Of course he'd known. The price of his immortality had never been just one life. All those wolves, Celine whispered, your entire kingdom, is built on a foundation of murder and stolen power. Kael's voice was flat. So tell me, Luna, if breaking the curse means killing everyone who's ever sworn loyalty to me, is it still the right choice? The question had no good answer. Outside, the cursed wolves were getting closer. Inside, Celine stood at the center of impossible choices, marked and powerful, and absolutely trapped. Sarah stepped forward, her voice cutting through the paralysis. There's another way. Everyone turned to look at her. The captain's face was set, determined. the expression of someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't be talked out of it. If the curse is tied to pack bonds, then we break the bonds. Every wolf in this keep renounces their oath to the Alpha King. Right now. Completely. That severs the connection. Then when the Luna rewrites the curse, it only affects Kael. Kael shook his head. Pack bonds aren't that simple. You can't just... We can if you release us. Sarah's voice was steady. You're the Alpha King. You have the authority to dissolve every oath, sever every bond. It'll leave you vulnerable, powerless, but it'll save lives. It'll also destroy everything I've built. 2 centuries of unity, gone in a moment. It's already destroyed. Sarah's honesty was brutal. Marcus's betrayal saw to that. Now you choose. Cling to power built on lies, or let it go and maybe survive to build something real. The words cut deep because they were true. Kael looked around the chamber, at the wolves who'd followed him, fought for him, bled for him. Seeing them clearly for maybe the first time, not as extensions of his power, but as people with lives that mattered beyond his kingdom. Celine watched him wrestle with it, felt every emotion through the bond. The pride that made releasing control almost impossible. The guilt that came with realizing his survival had cost so many people so much. The desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward that didn't require more death. Slowly, Kael straightened. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of command, but also something else. Surrender. I, Kael Draven, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, hereby release every wolf from their oaths, every bond, every loyalty, every tie that binds you to me. Consider it severed. You're free. The words hung in the air for a heartbeat. Then the power moved, old magic responding to an Alpha's command. Celine felt it through the bond, felt the connections breaking one by one, thousands of threads snapping simultaneously. Kael gasped, staggered. The loss was visible, physical, his immortality unraveling as the curse lost its anchors. He aged in seconds, not dramatically, but noticeably, lines appearing around his eyes, gray threading through dark hair, the weight of 200 years suddenly catching up. Sarah caught him before he fell. The captain's expression was complicated, grief and respect tangled together. It's done. Mordrin's smile had finally faltered. No, this isn't how it's supposed to go. Nothing's going how you planned. Celine stepped forward, power building in her palms. Because we're not following your script anymore. She reached for Kael, felt him reach back despite the exhaustion, despite the betrayal, despite everything. Their hands connected and the bond flared white-hot, Luna power and Alpha blood mixing in ways that should have been impossible. Celine could see the curse now, really see it. A web of stolen power woven through Kael's soul, thorns buried so deep they'd become part of him. Mordrin's work, intricate and vicious, designed to be impossible to remove without killing the host. But Celine had power older than Mordrin's tricks, had the inherited knowledge of the Luna Queen, the same woman whose death had fueled this nightmare. She reached into the curse and started pulling it apart thread by thread. Kael screamed. The pain must have been unimaginable, every nerve on fire as immortality burned away. But he didn't let go of her hand, didn't pull away, just held on and endured while Celine worked. The curse fought back. It had been alive in him for 2 centuries, had become as much a part of him as his heartbeat. It didn't want to die. Celine felt it lashing out, felt thorns trying to sink into her own soul, trying to infect her with the same poison. She burned them away with silver fire. The Luna marks on her arms spread further, across her chest, up her throat, mapping transformation in real time. Power poured through her in waves that threatened to tear her apart. Too much, too fast, but she couldn't stop now. If she stopped, Kael would die with the curse still hooked in his veins. The cursed wolves outside hit the inner keep doors. The ancient wards held, but Celine could feel them buckling, seconds away from shattering. Time was running out. She pulled harder, ripped deeper, and finally felt the curse's core. The knot of power that held everything together, Mordrin's masterwork, the stolen immortality that had cost so many lives. Celine grabbed it with both hands and tore. The explosion of power knocked everyone off their feet. The doors blew open, cursed wolves poured through, and Celine stood at the center of it all, glowing bright as the sun, while Kael collapsed at her feet, mortal and dying and free. Mordrin was screaming now, his centuries of planning crumbling. The cursed wolves stopped mid-charge, suddenly leaderless. the connection to their master severed. They scattered, confused, no longer the controlled army, but just monsters without purpose. Celine looked down at Kael. He was unconscious, barely breathing, the curse gone, but the toll of its removal almost fatal. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressed her hands to his chest, and poured everything she had left into keeping him alive. The Luna power responded. It had been built to destroy, yes, but also to heal, to nurture, to protect what mattered. Celine let it flow through her into Kael, stitching together what the curse's removal had torn apart. His eyes opened. Dark eyes without the gold flecks now, human eyes, mortal eyes that held 2 centuries of memory and the weight of terrible choices. Did it work? His voice was rough, barely a whisper. "You're alive." Celine managed a weak smile. "So I'd say yes." Kael tried to sit up, failed, settled for just breathing. "Marcus. Where's Marcus?" "Gone." Sarah appeared beside them, covered in blood but standing. He fled when the cursed wolves broke through, probably dead by now. The words should have hurt more than they did. Kael closed his eyes, and Celine felt his grief and relief tangled together through the bond. Good. Better dead than living with what he'd done. Around them, the surviving defenders were rallying. The Eastern Alliance forces, seeing their cursed wolf advantage disappear, and their Alpha King no longer immortal, were retreating. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Mordrin stood alone now, his smile gone, replaced by cold calculation. "You've broken the immediate curse." "Clever. But you can't undo 2 centuries of consequences. Every choice Kael made under that immortality's influence still stands. The enemies he created won't disappear just because he's mortal now. Then we'll face them." Celine stood on shaking legs, pulling Kael up with her. "As equals, as partners, not as pawns in your game." The priest's expression shifted to something that might have been respect or pity. "You think you've won, but this was never about winning, child. It was about evolution, forcing the packs to adapt or die. And look around, you've already started the process. The Alpha King brought low, the Luna reborn, trust shattered, everything ready to be rebuilt. What do you want from us?" Mordrin smiled again, cold and terrible. "I want you to survive long enough to see what comes next. Because the curse was just the beginning. The real question is what you build when all the lies are burned away." He vanished, not fled, not walked away, just ceased to be there. One moment present, the next gone like smoke on wind. And in his absence, the remaining wolves looked at each other with the dawning realization that everything they'd believed about their kingdom was built on sand. Kael leaned heavily on Celine, mortal and exhausted and utterly broken. "We need to address them, the survivors." Celine nodded, together. They walked through the ruined keep, past the bodies and the blood and the evidence of Mordrin's machinations. Wolves gathered in the courtyard, looking to their Alpha King for guidance. Kael stood before them and told the truth. All of it. The Luna Queen's murder, Marcus's betrayal, the curse that had held him for 2 centuries, the pack bonds he'd severed to break free. By the time he finished, half the assembled wolves were weeping. The other half looked ready to finish what the Eastern Alliance started. "I don't expect forgiveness." Kael's voice was raw but steady. "I don't even expect you to stay. You're free now, truly free. No bonds, no oaths, no obligations. You can walk away and I won't stop you." Nobody moved. They just stared at him, at Celine, at the ruins of everything they'd believed in. Then Sarah stepped forward. She dropped to one knee, right hand over her heart. "I swear a new oath. Not to the Alpha King, to the man, to the leader who just gave up everything to do what was right." Others followed. Slowly at first, then faster. Not all of them. Some did walk away, and Kael let them go without protest. But enough stayed. Enough knelt and swore new oaths, free oaths, chosen rather than compelled. Celine watched it happen and felt something shift, not just in the kingdom but in herself. The marks on her skin pulsed steadier now, settled, like they'd finally found their purpose. Kael looked at her, mortal and scarred and free for the first time in 2 centuries. "Now what? Now we rebuild." Celine took his hand, felt the bond between them stronger than ever despite the curse being broken. On truth this time. On choice. On all the things Mordrin tried to steal from us. The blood moon was finally setting. Dawn was coming, pale and cold but real. And in the ruins of Blackmoor Keep, the last Luna and the mortal Alpha King stood together and began the impossible work of building something worth protecting. But in the shadows beyond the castle walls, Marcus watched with ancient eyes and a priest's smile, and whispered to the darkness that carried his words to ears that shouldn't exist anymore. The script had changed, but the play wasn't over, and the next act would require sacrifices neither Kael nor Celine could imagine yet. The dawn that followed Mordrin's disappearance brought no peace. Blackmoor Keep stood gutted and smoking, its walls scarred by explosions, and the eastern section reduced to rubble that still held bodies they hadn't recovered yet. Celine stood on what remained of the battlements and watched the sun rise over a kingdom that had been built on lies and now had to decide what truth looked like. Below in the courtyard, Sarah was organizing the survivors. Maybe 300 wolves left from the 1,000 that had defended the keep, and half of those were wounded badly enough that they might not see another week. The Eastern Alliance had retreated but not fled, just pulled back beyond the mountains to lick their wounds and wait for another opening. Everyone knew the reprieve was temporary. Kael found her there as the sun cleared the peaks. He moved slower now, deliberately, like a man relearning his body's limitations. Mortality sat strange on him after 2 centuries of immortality, visible in the new lines around his eyes and the careful way he carried himself. But his gaze was still sharp when he looked at her. "We need to talk about what happens next." Celine didn't turn from the view. "What's there to talk about? Your kingdom is in ruins. Half your wolves are dead. Your most trusted general betrayed you, and somewhere out there Mordrin is planning his next move. That's why we need to talk." Kael stepped beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The bond between them hummed steady now, not the desperate pull of the curse, but something quieter and somehow more real. Because standing here feeling sorry for ourselves won't rebuild those walls or bring back the dead. "You sound like you have a plan." "I have the beginning of one." Kael gestured to the courtyard below. "Those wolves down there swore new oaths. Free oaths. They chose to stay when they could have walked away. That's not nothing. It's not enough either." Celine finally looked at him. "The Eastern Alliance has 5 times our numbers. The Western Coalition is watching to see if we collapse so they can claim the territory. And we have no idea what Mordrin's actual endgame is beyond forcing evolution through bloodshed. So we give them evolution, just not the kind he expects." Kael's voice hardened with something that might have been determination or desperation. "We send word to every pack on the continent. Offer them the same choice we gave our wolves. Dissolve the old bonds. Rebuild on truth instead of compulsion. Turn this from a war over the last Luna into a revolution against the system that made her necessary." Celine stared at him. "You want to dismantle the entire pack structure. I want to dismantle the structure that allowed someone like Mordrin to manipulate us all for 2 centuries. The structure that made Marcus think murder was acceptable if it protected power." Kael's jaw tightened. "Every alpha on this continent rules through bonds that were forged in conquest or inheritance. What if we offered something different? Loyalty earned instead of demanded. Unity chosen instead of enforced. They'll never agree to it. Most alphas would rather die than give up that kind of control. Then let them die." The words came out flat and certain. "Because the alternative is more of this. More cursed wolves. More prophetic manipulation. More Mordrins pulling strings while we dance." The brutal honesty of it took Celine's breath. This was what Kael looked like without the curse tempering him, she realized. Not softer. Harder. Someone who'd spent 2 centuries learning to make impossible choices and had just been freed to make them with actual consequences. How do we even begin something like that? We start with the truth. Kael turned to face her fully. We tell them everything. What I did to the Luna Queen, what Marcus helped orchestrate, what Mordrin built, and why it worked. We lay it all out and let them choose what comes next. Some will choose war. Probably. But some might choose different. And that's more than we had yesterday. Celine looked at him for a long moment, searching for doubt or deception and finding only exhaustion and grim determination. He meant it. Every word. Was willing to tear down 2 centuries of work on the chance that something better might grow in its place. The marks on her arms pulsed warm. Not painful now, just present, like they approved of the direction this was heading. All right. She straightened. Decision made. We try it your way. But if this starts another war we can't win, I reserve the right to say I told you so. Kael's laugh was brief and sharp. If it starts a war we can't win, neither of us will be alive to gloat. He was probably right. The thought should have terrified her, but instead Celine felt something like relief. At least this way they were choosing their fate instead of having it chosen for them. Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs, breathing hard like she'd run the whole way. "We have a problem." "Just one?" Kael's tone was dry, the kind that needs immediate attention. Sarah's expression was grim. "Scouts report movement from the west. Not the Western Coalition. Something else. And they're carrying white flags." "Parley." Celine felt her stomach clench. "Who?" "That's the problem." Sarah looked between them. "It's Marcus. He's requesting an audience with you both. Says he has information about Mordrin's next move." The silence that followed was suffocating. Kael's face went completely blank, the expression of someone who'd learned to hide emotion so deep it might never surface again. Through the bond, Celine felt his rage and grief tangled together, felt him wrestling with the instinct to refuse versus the need to know what Marcus was offering. "Where is he?" "At the outer perimeter. The scouts have him contained, but he's not resisting, just waiting." "How many wolves did he bring?" "None." "He's alone." That got Kael's attention. His eyes narrowed. "Alone. After betraying me and fleeing a battle. That's either incredibly stupid or incredibly calculated. Probably both." Celine touched his arm, felt him tense under her fingers. "We should hear him out." "You want me to listen to the man who orchestrated the murder of the Luna Queen and lied about it for 2 centuries? I want us to have every piece of information before Mordrin makes his next move." Celine's voice was steady. "You don't have to forgive him. You don't even have to let him live. But we need to know what he knows." Kael was silent for 5 long seconds. Then he nodded once, sharp. "Bring him to the throne room, under heavy guard. If he so much as breathes wrong, kill him." Sarah saluted and left. Kael stood there breathing carefully, visibly fighting for control. Celine waited beside him, close enough to offer support but not touching, giving him space to process. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "If I kill him, will you judge me for it?" "No." The answer was immediate. Whatever he did, whatever reasons he had, the consequences are real. People died because of his choices. You get to decide what that's worth. And if I let him live, then we deal with that too. Kael looked at her with something that might have been gratitude or just exhaustion that looked similar. "How are you so calm about all this?" "I'm not." Celine's laugh was bitter. "I'm terrified. But being terrified doesn't change what we have to do. So we do it anyway and figure out how to cope with the fallout later." That might be the most practical philosophy I've ever heard. Orphans learn practical early. Or we don't survive long enough for philosophy to matter. They walked together down to the throne room, neither speaking, both bracing for whatever came next. The bond between them felt steadier now, a constant presence that was becoming as familiar as breathing. Celine wasn't sure if that was comforting or terrifying. Maybe both. The throne room looked worse in daylight. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls where her power had exploded during the curse breaking. Blood still stained the stones. The throne itself sat empty, and something about that felt significant. Kael didn't move to occupy it, just stood in the center of the room with his arms crossed and waited. Marcus entered flanked by 6 guards, all with weapons drawn and expressions that said they'd welcome an excuse to use them. He looked terrible, haggard and pale, dark circles under his eyes that spoke of days without sleep. His armor was damaged, blood-stained, and he moved like someone who'd been injured recently and hadn't healed properly. He stopped 10 feet from Kael and met his eyes. The silence stretched until it became a physical thing pressing down on everyone present. Celine watched Kael's face, saw him taking in every detail of Marcus's appearance, cataloging damage and exhaustion with the eye of someone who'd fought beside this man for centuries. When Kael finally spoke, his voice was empty of everything. "Say what you came to say." Marcus flinched like he'd been struck. "Mordrin is planning something worse than the cursed wolves, something that will make the attack on Blackmoor look like a skirmish." "How do you know?" "Because I'm the one who helped him design it." The admission came out quiet, defeated. 200 years of contingencies, Kael. Plans within plans to ensure the prophecy unfolded correctly. The cursed wolves were just the opening move. Kael's hands curled into fists. What's the next move? The Southern Territories. Marcus looked sick. He's been gathering power there for decades. Not just cursed wolves, but something older. Pre-pack magic, the kind that existed before the first alphas learned to shift. He's planning to unleash it during the next blood moon eclipse. When is that? 3 days. Marcus met Kael's eyes. And when it happens, every wolf who's ever been touched by pack magic will go feral. Lose themselves to the base instincts and tear each other apart. Only the ones who've completely severed their pack bonds will be immune. The revelation hit like a hammer. Celine felt the implications spreading outward. Most wolves were still bound by traditional oaths. Even the ones who'd fled Blackmoor still carried bonds to other alphas, other packs. If Mordrin could trigger mass feral transformation, the continent would descend into complete chaos. Sarah's voice cut through the shock. How do we stop it? We can't. Not completely. Marcus's shoulders sagged. The ritual is already in motion. But we can disrupt it. If we destroy the anchor points before the eclipse reaches full, we limit the effect to just the Southern Territories instead of the entire continent. How many anchor points? 5. Spread across the southern region. Marcus pulled a folded map from his belt, held it out. I marked their locations. Nobody moved to take it. Marcus stood there holding the map like an offering, like absolution, until finally Celine stepped forward and took it from him. Their fingers didn't touch. Why are you telling us this? Her voice was careful, neutral. If you've been helping Mordrin for 2 centuries, why betray him now? Marcus looked at her with eyes that had seen too much and survived nothing. Because I finally realized what he's actually trying to create. Not evolution, extinction. He wants to break pack society so completely that what emerges afterward won't even be recognizable as wolf anymore. And I spent 200 years protecting Kael so he could build something worth preserving. I won't let Mordrin destroy that. Noble words from a traitor. Kael's voice was acid. You murdered the Luna Queen. You manipulated me into immortality. You orchestrated everything that led to this moment. Now you expect me to believe you've suddenly developed a conscience? I don't expect anything. Marcus straightened despite obvious pain. I'm giving you the information because it's the right thing to do. What you do with it, what you do with me, that's your choice. I won't fight it. The admission hung in the air. Celine watched Kael's face, saw him wrestling with centuries of friendship warring against recent betrayal. This was what power looked like when it couldn't hide behind immortality or destiny. Just a man trying to decide if mercy was strength or weakness. Kael stepped forward. Every wolf in the room tensed. He stopped inches from Marcus, close enough that the height difference was apparent, close enough that violence would have been easy. You said you spent 2 centuries protecting me, that you did all of this to keep me alive. His voice was barely above a whisper. Did you ever consider asking me if I wanted that? If I wanted to live forever built on a foundation of murder? Every day. Marcus's voice broke. And every day I convinced myself the alternative was worse. The alternative was letting me die with honor instead of living as a monster. You were never a monster, Kael. You were a king trying to survive impossible circumstances. I'm the one who made those circumstances impossible. Kael's hand shot out, grabbed Marcus by the throat. Not squeezing, not yet, just holding. The threat was clear. I should kill you, for the Luna Queen, for every choice you took from me, for 200 years of lies. Marcus didn't struggle, just met Kael's eyes and nodded slightly. I know. The moment stretched. Celine could see the war happening in Kael's face, the desire for vengeance against the practicality of needing Marcus's information. This was what leadership looked like when the easy answers were gone, she realized. When every choice carried weight that couldn't be ignored. Finally, Kael released him. Marcus stumbled back, coughing. You live because we need what you know. Kael's voice was flat. After this is over, after Mordrin is dealt with, we'll revisit what justice looks like. But until then, you do exactly what we say without question or hesitation. Clear? Clear. Good. Kael turned to Sarah. Get him a cell. Comfortable enough that he doesn't die of exposure, secure enough that he can't cause problems, and have someone who knows healing magic check his injuries. I need him functional. Sarah nodded and gestured for the guards to take Marcus away. He went without resistance, didn't even look back. The door closed behind them and Celine was left alone with Kael in the ruined throne room. He sagged the moment they were gone, all the strength bleeding out of him at once. Celine moved to his side, caught his arm before he could fall. That was harder than fighting the cursed wolves. Killing is always easier than mercy. Cale's laugh was bitter. At least with killing, you don't have to live with the consequences. You made the right choice. Did I? He looked at her with eyes that held too much doubt. Because from where I'm standing, I just decided that needing information was more important than justice. The Luna Queen deserves better than that. The Luna Queen is dead. Celine's voice was gentle but firm. And as much as it doesn't feel fair, the living matter more right now. We can't help her, but we can stop Mordrin from killing thousands more. When did you become the voice of reason? Probably right around the time you stopped being immortal and started being human. Cale managed a weak smile. Being human is terrible. I don't recommend it. Too late to go back now. Yeah. He straightened, pulling himself together through visible effort. 3 days until the eclipse. 5 anchor points to destroy. And an entire kingdom to mobilize when most of my forces are wounded or dead. We'll figure it out. Celine unfolded Marcus's map, studying the marked locations. The anchor points formed a rough circle around what looked like ancient ruins. The pattern felt deliberate, purposeful. This is ritual magic, old ritual magic judging by the geometry. Can you disrupt it? Cale leaned over to look. With your Luna power? Maybe, if I can get close enough to the anchor points before the eclipse. Celine traced the circle with her finger. But 5 locations in 3 days means we need to split our forces, and that makes us vulnerable. We're already vulnerable. Cale's tone was pragmatic. The question is whether we're vulnerable fighting or vulnerable hiding. I know which one I prefer. Fighting it is then. They spent the next hour planning. Sarah joined them with reports on who was combat ready, who could travel, what supplies they could spare. The numbers were grim but not impossible. They'd have to move fast, hit all 5 anchor points simultaneously on the night of the eclipse, and pray that Marcus's information was accurate. It was a terrible plan with too many variables and not enough backup. They committed to it anyway because the alternative was letting Mordrin win by default. By midday, they were ready to move out. Cale addressed the assembled wolves in the courtyard, laying out the situation with brutal honesty. No promises of glory or certain victory, just the facts and the choice. Fight or flee. Stay or go. Every wolf was free to decide. Most stayed. That said something about what they were building here, Celine thought. Not blind loyalty to power, but commitment to purpose. It wasn't much, but it was real. They split into 5 strike teams, each assigned to 1 anchor point. Cale would lead the northern assault. Sarah took the western. 3 other senior wolves commanded the remaining teams. And Celine would coordinate from a central position, using her Luna power to disrupt the ritual once all 5 teams were in place. It meant she'd be alone when the eclipse hit. Vulnerable. But her power was the only thing capable of actually breaking Mordrin's ritual, so the risk was necessary. Cale didn't like it. She could feel his resistance through the bond, his instinct to protect her warring against tactical necessity. But he didn't argue, just made her promise to run if things went wrong, and accepted her lie that she would. They had 1 night before the teams needed to depart, 1 night to rest and prepare and say the things that might not get said later if the plan failed. Celine found Cale on the battlements after dark, standing in the same spot where she'd watched the dawn. He didn't turn when she approached, but she felt him acknowledge her presence through the bond. Couldn't sleep? Haven't been able to sleep properly since the curse broke. Cale's voice was quiet. Turns out immortality was useful for that. Now I actually get tired. Welcome to being human. It's terrible. So I've heard. He glanced at her. You should be resting. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. I'll rest when I'm dead. Celine moved to stand beside him. Besides, I wanted to talk to you before we leave. About? About what happens if this goes wrong. If Mordrin's ritual succeeds and we all go feral. What then? Cale was silent for a moment. Then we hope we kill each other quickly instead of slowly. That's a terrible answer. It's an honest one. He turned to face her fully. But if you're asking whether I have contingency plans, yes. Sarah has orders to execute me if I turn. I've asked her to do the same for you. The casual way he said it made Celine's chest tight. You planned our deaths. I planned mercy. There's a difference. Kale's expression was unreadable. We've both seen what feral wolves become. If that happens to us, I'd rather die fast than become something that would horrify the people we're trying to protect. He was right. The logic was sound. But Celine found herself angry anyway, angry that they were in a situation where planning their own executions was reasonable. I hate this. The words came out sharper than intended. I hate that we have 3 days to stop a ritual we barely understand, orchestrated by someone who's been planning this for centuries. I hate that we have to split up and trust that everyone succeeds or we all die anyway. And I really hate that you're already planning our funerals. I know. Kale's voice softened. But hating it doesn't change what we have to do. Doesn't make it easier either. No. Nothing makes it easier. We just do it anyway because the alternative is worse. They stood together in the dark, the bond between them humming steady. And Celine realized this was what partnership looked like when prophecy stopped dictating choices. Not romance or grand gestures. Just two people standing together against impossible odds and deciding that was enough. Kale broke the silence first. If we survive this, we need to talk about what comes next. For us. What do you mean? The bond. The mate connection. It's real, Celine. Not the curse's manipulation anymore, but actual connection between us. We need to decide what we're going to do about that. Celine's heart was beating too fast. Do we have to decide now? No. But after this is over, assuming we're alive, we should probably address it. His expression was carefully neutral. Because I don't know about you, but I'm done with lies and deception. If we're going to be connected, I want it to be honest. The vulnerability in his voice made her breath catch. What do you want it to be? I don't know yet. Kale's honesty was brutal. 200 years ago, I had a mate. Loved her, lost her to age while I stayed frozen. Swore I'd never go through that again. Then you showed up, and the bond formed, and now I'm mortal, and you're marked, and everything's complicated. We don't have to figure it out tonight. I know. But I wanted you to know I'm not avoiding the conversation, just postponing it until we're not staring down potential extinction. Fair enough. They lapsed into silence again. Comfortable this time, less charged. Celine let herself lean slightly against Kale's side, felt him shift to support her weight. The bond pulsed warm and steady between them, no longer painful or desperate, just present. The night deepened. Stars came out despite the fading blood moon, pinpricks of light against the dark. And on the battlements of Blackmore Keep, the last Luna and the mortal Alpha King stood together and waited for dawn to bring them one step closer to either salvation or annihilation. The teams departed at first light. Kale's force heading north, Sarah's west, the others to their assigned positions. They'd coordinate timing by messenger bird, strike all 5 anchor points simultaneously during the eclipse, and pray that Celine's power was enough to shatter Mordrin's ritual. Celine watched them go from the courtyard, feeling through the bond as Kale moved further away. The distance pulled but didn't hurt, just a constant awareness of where he was and how he felt. Determined, scared, grimly certain that this would work or they'd all die trying. She turned to the handful of wolves left to guard the keep, mostly wounded who couldn't travel, plus a few volunteers who'd insisted on staying to protect her while she worked. Marcus was among them, still under guard but given enough freedom to be useful. He approached carefully, keeping his hands visible. The ritual will start at moonrise on the night of the eclipse. You'll feel it building through your marks. How long do I have to disrupt it? Once the eclipse reaches totality, maybe 10 minutes before the magic becomes irreversible. Marcus's expression was grim. And Mordrin will be at the center, conducting the ritual personally. If you want to stop him permanently, you'll have to face him directly. Where's the center? The old temple ruins. 3 miles south of here. Marcus pulled out another map, this one marked with a single location. He'll be expecting you, probably hoping you'll come so he can force the confrontation he's been planning for. Then I won't disappoint him. Celine took the map. Anything else I should know? Yes. Marcus hesitated, then spoke carefully. Kale cares about you, more than he's willing to admit. If this goes wrong, if you have to choose between stopping the ritual and saving him, choose the ritual. He'd want you to. The words hit harder than they should have. You're asking me to let him die if it comes to that. I'm asking you to finish what we started. Marcus's voice was steady. The Luna Queen died to fuel a curse. You have the chance to end that curse permanently. Don't waste it for any reason. Even love. You're a terrible person, you know that? I've known it for 200 years. Doesn't make me wrong. Celine wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Because Marcus was right, and she hated him for it. If stopping Mordrin's ritual meant sacrificing Kael, she'd have to make that choice, no matter what it cost her. The thought made her sick. The next 2 days crawled past in agonizing slowness. Reports came in from the strike teams. Positions secured, anchor points identified, ready to move on her signal. Everything was proceeding according to plan, which meant something would go catastrophically wrong because nothing had gone according to plan since this entire nightmare started. On the night of the eclipse, Celine stood in the courtyard and watched the moon rise. Already the shadow was beginning to cross its face, the slow creep toward totality. She could feel the ritual starting, power building like pressure before a storm. The marks on her arms began to burn in response. Time to move. She left the keep with her small escort, heading south toward the temple ruins. The forest was too quiet, every animal sensing the wrongness in the air and fleeing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. They reached the ruins just as the eclipse hit halfway. The temple was ancient, predating the Pack Kingdoms by centuries, all crumbling stone and faded carvings that depicted things Celine didn't want to understand. At its center, Mordrin waited. He looked exactly the same as before, unchanged, eternal, smiling with the confidence of someone who'd seen this moment coming and prepared for every variable. Around him in a perfect circle stood 5 pillars of dark stone, each pulsing with gathered power from the anchor points. The ritual was already active. Luna, his voice carried across the ruins. Right on time. I would have been disappointed if you hadn't come. Celine stepped into the clearing, her escort fanning out behind her. Where are the anchor teams? Engaged with my cursed wolves. Mordrin's smile widened. Did you really think I'd leave those positions undefended? They're fighting for their lives right now, including your precious Alpha King. Through the bond, Celine felt Kael's presence spike with sudden danger. He was under attack. They all were. The plan was falling apart in real time. You wanted me to come here. She moved closer to Mordrin, buying time. You engineered all of this just to force this confrontation. I engineered all of this to force evolution. You and Kael breaking the curse was just phase 1. Now comes phase 2, ritual magic that will strip away pack bonds entirely, leaving only the strongest to survive. Natural selection at its finest. You'll kill thousands. I'll forge a new world from their ashes. One where power is earned through strength instead of inherited through bloodlines. Where alphas rise and fall based on capability instead of prophecy. His expression turned almost paternal. You should thank me, child. I'm creating the world the Luna Queen would have wanted. Don't you dare use her memory to justify this. Why not? You carry her soul, her power, her purpose. Mordrin spread his arms wide. Everything I've done has been to complete what she started, destroying the old system, building something better. You're the key to finishing it. The eclipse reached totality. The pillars flared with blinding light, and Celine felt the ritual lock into place, power flowing through channels carved into the earth centuries ago, reaching for every wolf still bound by traditional pack magic. Through the bond, she felt Kael falter, felt the feral transformation beginning to take hold, felt him fighting it with everything he had and losing inch by inch. 10 minutes until it became irreversible. 10 minutes to choose between stopping the ritual and saving the man she'd started to care about. Marcus's words echoed in her mind. Choose the ritual. He'd want you to. Celine looked at Mordrin standing at the center of his masterwork, at the pillars channeling power that would reshape the continent, at the future he'd spent 2 centuries creating. Then she looked at the marks on her arms, glowing bright as stars, and made her choice. She reached for her Luna power. All of it. Every reserve she'd been building, every bit of inherited knowledge from the queen who'd died to start this. The marks spread across her entire body, silver light painting her skin until she burned bright as the eclipsed moon. Mordrin's smile faltered for the first time. Celine slammed her power into the ritual with everything she had. The pillars cracked. The carefully channeled magic fractured. And across the continent, wolves who'd been seconds from going feral suddenly found themselves free. The ritual's grip shattered before it could complete. But breaking something built over 2 centuries required breaking herself to do it. Celine felt her power tear through her in waves that should have killed her, felt the Luna marks burning too hot, consuming her from the inside. She was dying. She'd known it was possible, but the reality still shocked her. Through the bond, she felt Kael's presence surge with panic, felt him fighting to reach her even though he was miles away and surrounded by enemies. Mordrin was screaming now, his ritual collapsing around him. The pillars exploded one by one, releasing power in all directions. The ancient temple began to crumble. Celine fell to her knees as her vision went white. The last thing she felt before consciousness left her was Kael's presence in the bond, desperate and furious and too far away to help. And in the ruins of his shattered ritual, Mordrin smiled one final time and whispered to the darkness. Phase 3 begins now. Consciousness returned in fragments, each one sharper and more painful than the last. Celine became aware of her body first, the weight of it, the ache that lived in every muscle, the way breathing felt like dragging broken glass through her lungs. Then sound filtered in. Voices distant and urgent, the crackle of fire, wind moving through ruins. She opened her eyes to smoke and ash. The temple had collapsed. What remained were broken pillars and scattered stone, centuries of architecture reduced to rubble in minutes. Celine lay in the center of it, her escort wolves forming a protective circle around her. They looked battered, bloodied, but standing, alive against odds that should have killed them all. One of them noticed she was awake. "Luna." His voice cracked with relief. "Don't move, you're hurt badly." Celine tried to sit up anyway. Pain lanced through her entire body, white-hot and immediate. The marks on her skin were dim now, barely visible, like they'd burned themselves out from the inside. She looked down at her arms and saw burns crisscrossing the silver patterns, tissue damaged in ways that might never fully heal. The cost of breaking Mordrin's ritual was carved into her flesh. "Where is he?" Her voice came out raspy, throat raw from screaming she didn't remember. "Mordrin, did he escape?" "We don't know." The wolf looked uncertain. "After the pillars exploded, we lost sight of him. There's no body, but there's also no trail. He either died in the collapse or vanished. And Kael? The teams?" "The eclipse ended 10 minutes ago. Reports are coming in now." The wolf hesitated. The ritual was disrupted before completion. Some wolves went feral, but not all. Most are recovering. The anchor team succeeded. Most. Not all. Celine felt the bond in her chest, still present but muted somehow, like static on a frequency that should have been clear. Kael was alive. She knew that much. But something was wrong. "I need to stand." "Luna, you shouldn't." "I need to stand." They helped her up, supporting her weight when her legs threatened to give out. The world tilted dangerously, but Celine forced it back into focus through sheer willpower. She'd broken a ritual that had been building for 2 centuries. Standing was nothing compared to that. "Take me to the rally point, where the teams are supposed to regroup." The journey took hours that felt like days. Every step was agony, the burns on her arms weeping fluid that soaked through hastily applied bandages. But Celine kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant confronting what she'd done. The lives she'd saved and the price she'd paid. The choice she'd made to shatter the ritual, even knowing it might kill her. The choice Marcus had told her to make. They reached the rally point as the sun set on the second day after the eclipse. A clearing in the forest where the surviving teams had gathered to count their dead and figure out what came next. Wolves moved through the space like ghosts, tending wounds and burning bodies, and staring at nothing with eyes that had seen too much. Sarah found her first. The captain looked like she'd aged a decade in 3 days. New scars on her face, armor cracked and bloodied, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd been injured and was refusing to acknowledge it. When she saw Celine, something in her expression cracked. "You're alive. Thank the old gods, you're alive. Barely." Celine leaned heavily on her escort. "The ritual?" "On broken. Not cleanly, but broken enough." Sarah's voice was rough. "Maybe 100 wolves went fully feral. We had to put most of them down. The rest are recovering, but it'll take time. Could have been thousands if you hadn't stopped it. The numbers should have felt like victory. Instead, they just felt heavy. 100 dead. 100 wolves who'd lost themselves to Mordrin's manipulation and paid with their lives. Not thousands, no, but still too many." "Where's Kael?" Sarah's expression shuddered. "He's alive, but he's not himself." The words made Celine's blood run cold. "Show me." They found him at the edge of the clearing, sitting alone on a fallen log with his head in his hands. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, the weight of mortality sitting heavy on shoulders that had carried immortality for 2 centuries. When Celine approached, he looked up with eyes that were hollow in ways she'd never seen. Through the bond, she felt nothing, just static. Kael. Her voice came out softer than intended. What happened? I felt you dying. The words were flat, emotionless. Through the bond. Felt the ritual tearing you apart, and I was too far away to help, too weak, too human. He laughed, bitter and broken. 200 years as the strongest alpha on the continent, and when it mattered most, I couldn't do anything. But I'm alive. Celine moved closer despite her body's protests. I survived. We both did. You survived despite me. Not because of me. Kael's hands curled into fists. Do you understand what that means? I'm supposed to protect you. That's what the bond demands. What every instinct I have screams for. And I failed. You didn't fail. You completed your mission. Stopped the anchor point from fully activating. That's why I could break the ritual. I should have been with you. Should have faced Mordrin together. Instead, I followed the plan like a good soldier and nearly lost you for it. The pain in his voice cut deeper than the burns on her arms. Celine lowered herself onto the log beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Through the muted bond, she felt his anguish, his guilt, the terrible certainty that he'd proven himself unworthy of everything he'd been trying to build. This was what happened when someone spent 2 centuries as a king and then suddenly became just a man. The fall wasn't clean. It was messy and painful and full of doubts that immortality had hidden. Kael. She waited until he looked at her. You're right. You couldn't protect me. But I didn't need you to. I made my choice, used my power, did what had to be done. That's not failure. That's partnership. Partnership should mean standing together. Sometimes it means trusting the other person to handle their part while you handle yours. Celine's voice was steady despite the exhaustion pulling at her. You think I wasn't terrified when I felt you fighting at the anchor point? When the bond went dark and I didn't know if you were dying? But I trusted you to survive. And you did. Kael was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. I don't know how to do this. Be mortal. Be vulnerable. Be someone who fails when it matters. None of us know how until we're forced to learn. Celine touched his hand, felt him flinch before he allowed the contact. The difference is, you're learning in front of an audience who spent 2 centuries watching you be invincible. That's harder. But it doesn't make you less worthy. His fingers curled around hers slowly, tentative. How are you so calm about this? You nearly died. You burned yourself out, stopping Mordrin's ritual. You should be angry. I'm furious. Celine's laugh was weak. I'm also exhausted and in more pain than I knew was possible and terrified about what comes next. But being angry at you won't fix any of that. So I'm choosing to be grateful we're both alive instead. The bond between them pulsed once. Faint, but real. Not the overwhelming pull of the curse, or even the steady presence she'd grown used to. Just a thread connecting them, fragile as spider silk and somehow more honest for it. They sat together as the sun finished setting and the clearing filled with the sounds of wolves making camp for the night. Neither spoke, just existed in the same space, breathing the same air, connected by choices they'd made and survived. Eventually, Sarah approached with food and water. Neither of them were hungry, but they ate anyway because practical survival mattered even when everything else felt impossible. The captain sat with them for a while, updating them on casualty counts and supply situations in the same flat tone medics used when emotions were too close to the surface. Final count is 247 wolves survived from all 5 teams combined. We started with 400. Sarah's voice didn't waver. Most of the losses were at the northern anchor point. Mordrin's cursed wolves hit them hardest. The northern point. Kael's position. Celine felt him tense beside her, felt his guilt spike through the bond. He blamed himself for those deaths, for not being strong enough, fast enough, immortal enough to save them. They died following orders I gave. Kael's voice was hollow. Orders that put them in Mordrin's path deliberately. Orders that prevented thousands more from dying. Sarah's tone was firm. Don't disrespect their sacrifice by making it about your guilt. They chose to fight. They knew the risks. Honor that. The words hit hard because they were true. Kale nodded slowly, accepting what he couldn't change. What about the other packs? How are they responding to the ritual's failure? Mixed reactions. Some are relieved. Others are calling it proof that the old ways are dying and we should return to traditional pack structures. Sarah's expression was grim. The Western Coalition is mobilizing. They see this as an opportunity to claim territory while we're weak. Let them come. Kale's voice was quiet but certain. If they want war, we'll give them war. But on our terms this time. No more prophecies, no more curses, just choices and consequences. Sarah nodded and left them alone again. The clearing was quieter now, wolves settling in for sleep, exhaustion winning over vigilance. Celine felt her own body demanding rest, but couldn't bring herself to lie down yet. Something felt unfinished. What did Mordrin mean? She broke the silence carefully. His last words before I lost consciousness. He said, Phase 3 begins now. Kael stiffened. You heard that? I felt it more than heard it, through the power. Like he was speaking directly to my marks. Celine looked at her damaged arms, at the burns overlaying the silver patterns. What's Phase 3? I don't know. But if he survived the temple collapse, he's still out there. Still planning. Kael's jaw tightened. Which means this isn't over. Then we keep fighting, until it is. We. Kael turned to look at her fully. You're staying? After everything? After I failed to protect you and nearly got you killed? Where else would I go? Celine met his eyes. You're my mate, Kael. Bond or no bond, curse or no curse. That's real. And I don't abandon people I care about just because things get difficult. The vulnerability in his expression nearly broke her. I don't deserve that kind of loyalty. Nobody deserves loyalty. They earn it through choices. You've made plenty of terrible ones, but you've also made good ones. You gave up immortality to save your kingdom, released every pack bond to prevent mass death, fought beside me instead of using me as a weapon. Celine's voice was steady. Those choices matter more than your failures. Kael was silent for a long moment. Then he raised her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her burned skin that was gentle enough to not hurt. I promise I'll do better, be better. Whatever it takes to be worthy of what you're offering. Just be honest. That's all I ask. No more secrets, no more manipulations. Just you, as you actually are, broken parts and all. That might be the hardest thing you've ever asked me to do. I know. Celine smiled despite the exhaustion. But you're mortal now. You have time to learn. They stayed there together as the night deepened, talking in low voices about everything and nothing. Plans for rebuilding Blackmoor Keep. Strategies for dealing with the Western Coalition, theories about what Mordrin's Phase 3 might entail, but also smaller things, stories from before the curse, memories of pack life when it was simpler, dreams of what might be possible if they survived long enough to build it. By the time the moon rose, Celine was leaning against Kael's shoulder, and he had his arm around her, supporting her weight. The bond between them hummed quiet and steady, no longer painful or desperate, just present. Real in ways the curse had never been. Marcus appeared from the shadows like a ghost. He looked worse than anyone, barely able to stand, fresh wounds layered over old scars. The guards with him kept weapons drawn, ready to strike if he made any threatening moves. He stopped at a respectful distance. I heard you survived, both of you. I'm glad. Kael's expression went carefully neutral. You have something to report? Information. Always information with me. Marcus's laugh was bitter. I spoke with some of the wolves who fought at the anchor points. Mordrin's cursed wolves didn't fight to kill. They fought to delay. Like they were buying time for something else. For what? I don't know. But I think the ritual failure was factored into his plans. Marcus met Kael's eyes. He's too smart to put all his resources into one approach. Whatever Phase 3 is, it's his real endgame. Everything else was just preparation. The revelation settled over them like frost. Celine felt Kael tense, felt his mind already working through implications and possibilities. If Mordrin had planned for the ritual's failure, then they hadn't won. They just moved to the next stage of a game whose rules they still didn't understand. Where would he go? Kael's voice was controlled. If he survived, where would he run to? Not run. Consolidate. Marcus pulled out yet another map. this one marked with locations Celine didn't recognize. The Southern Territories have been his base for decades. If he's planning something, it'll launch from there. The Southern Territories where chaos reigned and alphas changed with the seasons, where pack law was more suggestion than structure and violence was currency. Perfect ground for someone like Mordrin to operate without oversight. We need to go there. Celine pushed herself upright despite her body's protests. Find him before Phase 3 activates. You can barely stand. Kael's concern was immediate. You need rest, healing, time to recover. We don't have time. Celine met his eyes. You felt what I felt through the bond. Mordrin's planning something worse than cursed wolves or feral transformations. If we wait, if we give him space to prepare, next time we might not survive. She's right. Marcus's voice was quiet. I've spent 2 centuries helping him build contingencies. Whatever he has planned, it'll be designed to account for every variable, including your survival. Then we end this now. Kael stood, offering Celine his hand. While he's still recovering from the ritual's failure, before he can regroup. Sarah stepped forward from where she'd been listening. You're both in no condition to travel. Half the wolves here are barely functional. This is suicide. Probably. Kael's tone was pragmatic. But staying here and waiting for Mordrin's next move is also suicide. At least this way we're choosing how we die. The captain looked between them, searching for some sign they were joking. Finding none, she sighed heavily. How many wolves do you need? 50. Mobile, expendable, willing to follow orders that will probably kill them. Kael's honesty was brutal. I won't lie to them about the odds. You'll have 100. Sarah's voice was firm. Because if you're going to do something this stupid, you're doing it with enough backup to maybe survive it. They spent the next day preparing. Wolves who could walk were given the choice to join or stay. Most stayed too wounded or too traumatized to face another battle so soon. But enough volunteered, driven by loyalty or vengeance or simple acceptance that this was their purpose. Marcus went with them, not as a leader but as a guide, someone who knew the Southern Territories and Mordrin's patterns well enough to predict where he might consolidate. Kael kept him under constant guard but allowed the information to flow, practical necessity overriding the desire for revenge. They moved south through territories that showed signs of the ritual's partial success, abandoned packhouses, feral wolves that had to be put down, entire villages empty, their inhabitants either dead or fled. The damage was contained compared to what Mordrin had planned, but it was still devastating. Celine walked beside Kael, both of them struggling with injuries that should have kept them bedridden. But stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant confronting the probability that they were marching toward their deaths. Better to keep moving and focus on the next step, the next mile, the next choice that needed making. On the 3rd day, they reached the Southern Territories proper. The landscape changed, became wilder, less tamed. Forests gave way to badlands, rocky terrain that made every step treacherous. Perfect ground for ambushes and last stands. Marcus led them to a canyon system that cut through the region like scars. At its heart was an ancient structure, predating even the temple ruins. Not a temple this time, but something older. A place where the first wolves had gathered before packs existed, before hierarchy and territory, and all the structures that defined their society. Mordrin was waiting at its center. He looked diminished, Celine realized with shock. The ritual's failure had cost him too. His priest's robes were torn and bloodied. His face was haggard, centuries of carefully maintained appearance cracking to reveal the exhaustion underneath. But his smile remained, sharp and knowing. You came, just as predicted. He spread his arms wide, welcoming. I'm impressed. Most wolves would have taken time to recover. But not you two. Too stubborn, too determined, too afraid of what happens if you hesitate. Kael stepped forward, hand on his sword. We're here to end this. End what? Mordrin's laugh was genuine. My ritual failed. My cursed wolves are scattered. The prophecy has been subverted. By all accounts, you've won. Then why are you still smiling? Because winning and surviving aren't the same thing. Mordrin's expression shifted to something almost fond. You've both proven stronger than I expected. Adaptable. Capable of breaking my carefully laid plans. That's exactly what I wanted to see. Celine felt ice crawl down her spine. The ritual wasn't your endgame. It was a test. Very good. Mordrin nodded approvingly. 2 centuries of observation taught me that true evolution requires pressure. I needed to know if you could break free from destiny's script, if you could survive without the crutches of prophecy or immortality. And you did, beautifully. So what now? Kale's voice was dangerous. You admit defeat and walk away? I admit success and offer a choice. Mordrin gestured to the ancient structure behind him. This place holds power older than pack magic, older than the Luna Queen, power that predates the division between human and wolf. I've spent 2 centuries unlocking it. For what purpose? To complete the evolution I started. Erase the distinction between Alpha and Omega, Luna and common wolf. Return us all to the base state and let natural selection determine who survives. No more hierarchies, no more inherited power. Just strength and will and the courage to embrace what we were always meant to be. The words painted a vision of complete chaos. Every wolf reduced to the same baseline, forced to compete without the structures that had organized their society for millennia. It was madness dressed as liberation. You want to destroy pack society entirely. Celine stepped forward beside Kael. Everything we've built, every alliance and treaty and attempt at civilization, gone. I want to tear down the rot and let something better grow. Mordrin's voice was steady. Your reformed bonds are a start, but they don't go far enough. As long as hierarchy exists, someone will manipulate it. Someone will abuse it. Better to remove the possibility entirely. By killing how many thousands? By freeing millions. His smile widened. But here's where it gets interesting. I can't activate the power alone. It requires 2 sources, Alpha Blood and Luna Light. I need you both to make this work. The implication hit like a hammer. Mordrin needed them, not as enemies, but as collaborators. That's why he'd led them here, why he'd smiled when they arrived. This entire confrontation was another manipulation. We'll never help you. Kale's voice was ice. We've seen what your vision looks like. It's just death with philosophical justification. Then you'll stop me by force? Mordrin gestured casually. You're exhausted, wounded, outnumbered. My cursed wolves hold every entrance to this canyon. Your 100 soldiers are currently fighting for their lives. And you're standing here, alone with me, exactly where I need you. As if summoned, howls erupted from the canyon walls. Cursed wolves emerged from hidden positions, dozens of them, surrounding Kyle's forces. The sound of combat echoed off stone, immediate and desperate. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos, shouting orders, trying to coordinate a defense against overwhelming numbers. Wolves fell. Blood painted the rocks. And in the center of it all, Mordrin watched with the satisfaction of someone whose plans were finally bearing fruit. Celine looked at Kael. Through the bond, she felt his calculation, his assessment of impossible odds, the way his mind worked through scenarios and found no good outcomes. They could fight and die here, or they could give Mordrin what he wanted and damn the entire continent. Neither option was acceptable, so they'd have to create a third option. The way they'd been doing since this nightmare started. Taking the script Mordrin had written and tearing it up. Kael. Her voice was quiet, meant only for him. Trust me. Always. Celine turned to Mordrin, raised her hands in apparent surrender. You want Alpha Blood and Luna Light? Fine, you'll get both. But on our terms. Before Mordrin could respond, she grabbed Kael's hand and poured everything she had left into the bond between them. Not just her Luna power, but her will, her determination, the absolute refusal to let Mordrin win. She felt Kael respond immediately, his alpha strength surging to meet hers, 2 sources of power that shouldn't mix suddenly combining in ways neither had attempted before. The marks on her arms flared white-hot one final time. Kael's eyes burned gold, his mortal blood remembering what immortality had felt like. And together they pushed that combined power not into Mordrin's ancient structure, but into the earth itself. The canyon shook. Stone cracked. The ancient structure began collapsing, its carefully preserved power leaking into the ground, dissipating harmlessly instead of concentrating into Mordrin's ritual. Celine felt her consciousness fracturing, the cost of channeling this much power without preparation, but she held on through sheer willpower. Kael held on with her. She felt him through the bond, felt his strength anchoring hers, preventing the power from tearing her apart completely. Partnership. Real partnership, not the scripted version Mordrin had tried to engineer. The structure collapsed entirely. The ancient power bled away. And Mordrin's smile finally died as he realized what they'd done. No. His voice cracked. You've destroyed it. Centuries of preparation. The only source of true transformation left on this continent. Good. Kael's voice was steady despite the exhaustion. Because your version of transformation was just another cage. We'll find our own way forward. Mordrin staggered, suddenly looking ancient and powerless. Around them, the cursed wolves were faltering, their connection to their master severing as his power base crumbled. Sarah's forces rallied, pushing back the attack, turning the tide through sheer determination. Celine felt her grip on consciousness slipping. She'd burned through every reserve twice over, pushed her body and power past breaking points that should have killed her. The world was going dark at the edges, sound fading to a dull roar. Kyle caught her before she fell. His voice was distant but urgent. Stay with me. Don't you dare leave now. Not leaving, just sleeping. Her words slurred together. Wake me when it's over. She let the darkness take her, secure in the knowledge that this time she was falling with someone there to catch her. That whatever came next, they'd face it together instead of being forced into prophesied positions. The bond between them pulsed once more, steady as a heartbeat. And then Celine knew nothing at all. Recovery took weeks. Celine woke in Blackmore Keep to find it partially rebuilt, walls rising from rubble, wolves working together to restore what had been destroyed. The marks on her arms were faded now, barely visible silver threads against scarred skin. Her power was diminished, maybe permanently, but still present. Still hers. Kael was there when she opened her eyes. He looked better, healthier, mortality settling into him like clothes finally fitting properly. When he saw her awake, his relief was palpable. Welcome back. How do you feel? Like I was trampled by 100 cursed wolves. Celine managed a weak smile. What happened? After the canyon? Mordrin fled, barely escaped with his life. His cursed wolves scattered without his power to control them. Most have been hunted down. The rest will be dealt with eventually. Kael helped her sit up carefully. Your collapse scared everyone. We thought we'd lost you. Takes more than shattering an ancient power source to kill me, apparently. She looked around the room, recognizing it as the same chamber she'd been given when she first arrived. How long was I out? 3 weeks. The healers said your body was healing itself but slowly. Something about the Luna power rebuilding from the ground up. 3 weeks. Celine absorbed that. What else did I miss? The Western Coalition backed down once word spread about Mordrin's defeat. The Eastern Alliance is fragmenting without the promise of the last Luna to unite them. Kael's voice was measured. Pact society is restructuring. Some territories are adopting our model of free bonds. Others are clinging to traditional hierarchies. It's messy, but it's change. And Marcus stood trial. The wolves voted on his fate. He's been exiled, forbidden from any pact territory for the rest of his life. Kael's expression was complicated. He accepted the sentence without protest, left the day after it was handed down. Is that justice? It's mercy disguised as punishment, letting him live with what he did instead of giving him the quick death he probably wanted. Kael paused. He asked me to tell you he was sorry. For everything. Celine didn't know how to feel about that. Sorry didn't undo 2 centuries of manipulation, but it was something, an acknowledgement at least. She spent the next weeks regaining strength, learning to walk without exhaustion dragging at every step, relearning her power's new limits. The marks responded differently now, less overwhelming but more precise, like a tool she could actually control instead of a force that controlled her. Kael was there through all of it, not hovering, not smothering, just present. They talked about everything and nothing, built routines together, figured out what their relationship looked like without curses or prophecies forcing the shape of it. One night, standing on the rebuilt battlements under a clear sky, finally free of the blood moon, Kael broke the comfortable silence between them. I've been thinking about what comes next. For us. Celine turned to look at him. And what did you decide? That I want to build something real with you. Not because fate demanded it, not because the bond forced it, but because you're the first person in 2 centuries who made me want to be better instead of just stronger. The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. What does that look like? I don't know yet. We figure it out together, make mistakes, learn from them, Build something that's ours instead of destiny's. Kael took her hand carefully, mindful of her healing scars. No prophecies, no scripts, just choices and whatever comes from them. Celine looked out over the kingdom they'd fought so hard to save. Imperfect, messy, full of wolves still learning what freedom meant. But alive, growing, becoming something that might actually be worth all the pain it had cost. She turned back to Kael, saw him watching her with eyes that held no gold anymore but somehow looked more alive for it. Saw the mortal king who'd given up immortality for truth, who'd fought beside her instead of for her, who'd chosen to become better when it would have been easier to become bitter. All right, her voice was steady. Let's build something worth keeping. He smiled then, real and unguarded. Deal. They stood together as the stars came out, the bond between them quiet and certain. Below them, the kingdom slowly healed. Around them, the future stretched uncertain but possible. And for the first time since the blood moon had risen, Celine felt something that might have been hope. Months passed. The seasons changed. Blackmore Keep finished its reconstruction, stronger than before, built on foundations of choice rather than compulsion. Other territories followed their model, dissolving old bonds and forging new ones. Pack society transformed slowly, painfully, but it transformed. Mordrin's whereabouts remained unknown. Some said he died in the canyon collapse. Others claimed they'd seen him in distant territories, still planning, still scheming. Celine suspected the truth was somewhere in between. He was alive but diminished, his grand visions reduced to survival. Let him plot. They'd broken his rituals before. They'd do it again if necessary. Marcus sent letters occasionally, never asking for forgiveness, just providing information about threats he'd heard about, warnings about old enemies, apologies dressed as intelligence reports. Kael read them all and never responded. Some wounds were too deep for words to bridge, and Celine learned to live with the scars. Physical ones on her arms, emotional ones in her heart, all the marks left by trauma and choice and survival. They didn't define her, but they were part of her now. Evidence that she'd fought and bled and refused to break when breaking would have been easier. On the anniversary of the night she'd collapsed in that ceremony, Kael found her on the battlements again. They seemed to gravitate toward that spot, drawn by the view or the memory or just the habit of standing together against whatever came. He handed her a small wooden box. Open it. Inside was a pendant, silver worked into intricate patterns that matched the marks on her arms. Luna light captured in metal. Beautiful and simple and entirely hers. I had it made from the remains of the anchor points. Kael's voice was quiet. Seemed appropriate. Taking what Mordrin built for destruction and turning it into something that matters. Celine lifted it out carefully, felt the weight of it. It's perfect. He helped her fasten it around her neck. The pendant settled against her collarbone, warm from his hands. When he stepped back, his expression held something she'd learned to recognize as contentment. We did it, you know. Built something worth keeping. Did we? Look around. Kael gestured to the rebuilt keep, the thriving kingdom beyond. We took prophecy and curse and 2 centuries of lies, and we turned it into actual choice. Not perfect, not even good all the time, but real. He was right. They'd survived not by following destiny, but by refusing to let it dictate their choices, by choosing each other, choosing truth, choosing to build instead of destroy even when destruction would have been easier. What do you think happens next? Celine asked. After all this? More of the same, probably. Threats and challenges and impossible choices. Kael smiled. But we'll face them together, on our terms. Sounds exhausting. Probably, but also worth it. Celine leaned into him, felt his arm wrap around her shoulders, solid and real. Through the bond, she felt his certainty, his commitment, the quiet determination to keep building no matter what came. It matched her own. Below them, the kingdom prepared for another night. Wolves gathering in the great hall, sharing meals and stories, building community from the ashes of what had been. Above them, the stars shone clear and bright, unmarred by prophecy or curse. And on the battlements of Blackmore Keep, the last Luna and the mortal king stood together and watched their imperfect kingdom thrive. Not because fate demanded it, but because they'd chosen to make it so. The blood moon was gone. The prophecy was broken. And what remained was better than either could have imagined when this nightmare started. They'd survived. That was enough. Everything else was just learning to live with the consequences and building something beautiful from the ruins. Together, the end.